Hello and welcome to And the Runner-Up Is. This week on the show, we're talking the 2002 Best Actress race at the Academy Awards, where Nicole Kidman won for her performance in The Hours. But why did she beat fellow nominees Salma Hayek, Diane Lane, Julianne Moore, and Renée Zellweger? We'll explore all this and more today on And the Runner-Up Is. Hello and welcome back to And the Runner-Up Is. I'm your host, Kevin Jacobson, here to talk about the 75th year of Best Actress at the Oscars, which covered the films of 2002. We'll be discussing how Nicole Kidman won, why the losers lost, and who we think was the runner-up of this Best Actress race. And my guest today is someone that I've been wanting to have on this show for a very long time, and I'm so excited she's here. Formerly at Vanity Fair, now the awards editor at The Ankler, also co-host of Fighting in the War Room. Welcome to the show, Katey Rich.
Hi, thank you so much for giving me yet another excuse to talk too much about the Oscars.
Oh,
who would have guessed?
Anytime.
That,
yes.
that I would just do that in my spare time for fun.
Likely place for you to be.
Exactly.
Yes. Well, actually, before we talk 2002, would love to get your thoughts on Best Actress as a category. So my first question for you is, what would you say is your favorite Best Actress win of all time?
As I told you before we started recording, I really felt like I had to do some research about this because it's like definitely some like recency bias, and then I want to like sound impressive, like I can go back and say I know a lot about Janet Gaynor's Oscar win, which I don't.
Who could forget?
I'm assuming you do. I don't know a single thing about any of those movies. And then I was like, there's like some Oscars where the person wins for the right role, like Audrey Hepburn for Roman Holiday or Barbra Streisand for Funny Girl, where like that is the performance that you associate that person with. But the one that like really sang to me as I was scrolling through Wikipedia last year, or I guess early this year, I did a screen draft on the films of Martin Scorsese and watched every Scorsese movie, many of them for the first time. And that was so much work that it feels like using every part of the buffalo. Like I'm going to keep bringing up the fact that I've seen all those movies on other podcasts. And I watched Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore for the first time for that project. I was just blown away, I mean, every possible way by it. For, all the reasons we don't think of Scorsese for performances by women, although there's a lot of really good ones in there. And Ellen Burstyn is just unbelievable in that movie. Like it is such a huge star performance in a movie that like no one had that high ambitions for. Like she really wanted to get that movie made. She got Scorsese hired for it. Even at that point, women's pictures didn't really exist as a thing, but that movie is so in conversation with women's pictures of the past. She is so central to the whole thing. She and Diane Ladd are unreal together.
I love that.
So
yeah.
It is really kind of one of those, she's not a Barbra Streisand level star, but it is a like right performance for the right performer. It all happened the way that it should have. So that's where I landed.
I love that. And if you haven't watched the whole 1974 Best Actress lineup, I would highly recommend it just to add on to your homework, because
I'm looking
incredible.
Here, like I haven't seen One Woman Under the Influence, which is like my great shame. I have seen Chinatown, but like, is Lenny something I should be like seeking out? I think you might be the first person to ever tell me to like really sit down with it.
Valerie Perrine makes it worth it. I'll say that.
Okay. All right. I'll take
and
that.
Diane Carroll and Claudine. That's a really cool nomination.
Yeah.
But
that is cool.
yes, I love that Ellen Burstyn win. I think she makes it look easy, and it's really not.
Yeah. Oh man, and performing with that kid, like I'm raising young children of my own, and like that relationship between a mother and the son, where like he just makes her like cry out of frustration by telling the bad joke over and over again.
Yes.
It's like, that is what it is like.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
She's wonderful.
Also in that movie, a baby Jodie Foster, future two-time Best Actress winner. Yes.
Baby Jodie Foster in like the most like tomboy, like, what would have then been called tomboy. And you watch that and you're like, God, we made this woman wait decades to come out. And like, here she was at the very beginning of her career. It was right there.
Well, love that pick. But my other question for you, as you know, there have been many heartbreaking losses in this category over the years that we have personally invested ourselves in, and then they don't happen, and we are maybe crushed. I don't know about you. I tend to take things personally sometimes in this category. So what would you say is your most heartbreaking loss in Best Actress?
I feel like this is where my cynicism comes in, because I was, trying to think of like races that I would have been aware of enough to know, to be rooting for something,
Sure.
like when Angela Bassett loses for What's Got Love Got to Do with It, I'm not old enough to like get a sense of what the race is. And even now, like looking back over the last couple of years, like maybe I thought Rosamund Pike would have been a great winner for Gone Girl, but like that was never really going to happen. So I think with the exception maybe of Meryl Streep and Viola Davis in 2011, but then I think now, knowing what we know, I don't know that any of us really want Viola Davis to have won for The Help, maybe to have won Best Actress. You can go back and forth on that. Yeah. So I kind of thought I would do some like revisionist history, like less about what was heartbreaking in the moment and more like looking back, like this is a chance we could have had to set things right. And I settled on 2017, which is when Frances McDormand wins for 3 Billboards, which is like, I don't love that movie. I got nothing against that performance. I think at that time we were like, yeah, second Oscar for Frances McDormand. Who's going to argue with that? She then, of course, wins Best Actress 3 years later for Nomadland. Would that have happened without 3 Billboards? Who can say? But I think if you could go back to 2017, give Saoirse Ronan Best Actress for Lady Bird. You get an Oscar for Lady Bird, which it deserves in every possible way. You get Saoirse Ronan an Oscar, which like I think we all feel like she will win at some point, but
and feels like that could have been at the right time.
It could have been at the right time. It's a great performance. It's a contemporary, funny performance, which just like never wins. Like it would have been such a standard breaker. Like, looking at the lineup, I guess Sally Hawkins is probably the runner-up. I guess she'll get there. I don't want to spoil your podcast in a long way away. Yeah. So it's not even like that easy a thing. And again, at the time, like I didn't think that she was going to win. I think everyone knew Frances McDormand would. But like that to me feels like the place where you can tinker just a little bit, set things straight. I feel like we're going to get to some like tinkering about who should win when in these early 2000s actress races. So another spoiler. So yeah, that's my weird roundabout way of getting there.
I love that. Yes. It's hard to argue with that one either because...
Oh, good.
Yes. When we get into the discussion of people winning multiple Oscars, you do tend to go retrospective and be like, oh, well, this other person who still hasn't won yet, that could have been a great time to do that. As I bring up almost every episode, Glenn Close could have won for Dangerous Liaisons. Jodie Foster didn't need to have that accused Oscar when she had Silence of the Lambs 3 years later. So, yeah.
And yet no one could know at the time. Is there someone who we would take Sally Field's first Oscar away for? Or is like Norma Rae so undeniable?
That one would be pretty undeniable, even though I personally love Bette Midler and The Rose. But, the second one is a little more negligible. But, that's just a weird year.
They wouldn't have that choice with eyes wide open, and they did it anyway.
Yep. Oh, yes. Well... Let's talk about this year at the Oscars, the 75th Academy Awards, the Diamond Jubilee, as they say on the ceremony. The nominees were Salma Hayek in Frida, Nicole Kidman in The Hours, Diane Lane in Unfaithful, Julianne Moore in Far From Heaven, and Renée Zellweger in Chicago, with the winner being, by a nose, Nicole Kidman. So before we break down these performances, Katey, what are your overall thoughts just from looking back on this lineup?
I mean, at the time, I'm like a freshman in college when this is happening. As we'll talk about, the Iraq War is starting. Like,
oh, yes.
Not that the Iraq War was like the primary thing going on in my life, but like I was not in my prime of watching new movies. Like I was in college, I was like going to the film series to see Purple Rain, like that kind of thing. I did see all of these movies at the time. Like I remember, being invested in Chicago, I think more than anything, like, certainly Far From Heaven's the first Todd Haynes movie I ever saw. I guess I saw all of these at the time. But I did feel like, I sort of chose this based on, the ones you gave me, mostly because I was really familiar with these movies. But it's really an all hits, no skips Best Actress lineup, which is not something you get a lot of in the 2000s more than any time. Like great performances and like 5 movies that either I have watched them all recently or I'm like very glad to have revisited and will continue to watch recently. Like they did really well for themselves with this lineup. And I don't think it gets enough credit for being as strong as it is.
I completely agree. I love, love, love this lineup. I love this year. This is one of those foundational years for me where actually both of the best actress and supporting actress lineups I've been kind of obsessed with since as far back as I can remember. Just the level of star quality here, I think, is just really fun. The performances, this kind of Cinderella moment for Nicole. I don't know. I just look back on this year with a lot of fondness for whatever reason.
Yeah. Well, there's the dark side of it that is less fun to talk about, which is like this is peak Weinstein power. And I think for those of us who kind of grew up following the Oscars in the late 90s, early 2000s, they're just like kind of baked in to the whole thing. Like we kind of learned to love the Oscars while they were there, and we can't untangle those things. And so there's a lot of darkness to it, which we will get to. But it does feel like for people of a certain age group, like I think people who are younger than us can be like, how can you possibly want to revisit this time when like the Weinsteins were tormenting people? I'm like, I know, I get why you want that, but you just can't not. You can't not take it all as a whole, and be, grateful for what managed to emerge from, some horror shows there.
Yeah, totally. And oddly enough, though, I had only actually seen 3 of these 5 performances before this week.
Wow.
So, yeah, I had seen Chicago many times. I had seen The Hours multiple times. I'd seen Far From Heaven multiple times. All 3 movies I love. I hadn't actually
those are the big 3. Those are the totemic ones from this year.
Yeah, I hadn't fully seen Frida or Unfaithful for whatever reason. So it was excited to fill in those gaps and really just confirm how strong this lineup was. And yeah, it's just very dynamic where it feels like all 5 roles are just very active in their films and really just have so much of their individual strengths as actresses in these roles. So yeah.
And they're different things. Like you've got 2 people playing real famous artists, but those movies are so different that those performances don't really overlap in any way. Like there's like, I guess there's like tormented wives, but like it's a different kind of tormented wife. Like it's got so much variety to it.
Also, something I picked up on just from like finishing through The Hours even is just like a lot of infidelity happening this year. What's that about? Why are we examining that so much this year? Interesting. Yeah.
And you got like Frida Kahlo and Diego Rivera like trying to be all modern about it. And you've got Far From Heaven where everyone's just torturing themselves about it and everything in between.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And Chicago, that all kind of like stems a little bit from that. So fun stuff. Yeah. Well, I think we should jump right into it, starting with our first nominee here, Salma Hayek in Frida. Okay, so Salma Hayek is the first of 2 actresses here getting their first and still so far only Oscar nomination. But to introduce her here, Salma Hayek was born in Veracruz in Mexico. She rose to fame in her early 20s for playing the title role of Teresa, a telenovela that ran for 2 years. So after that, she set her sights on Hollywood. She studied with Stella Adler, and after a few years of struggling to get work, mostly due to being a Latin actress in like the 90s, she had her breakthrough in 1995 when Robert Rodriguez cast her in Desperado, starring alongside Antonio Banderas. She was in Fool's Rush In. A few years later, she was in 54, The Faculty, Dogma, Wild Wild West, Time Code, and just gradually becoming a star over time. And in the meantime, she's dipping her toe into producing and becomes very invested in producing this biopic of Frida Kahlo, the painter. She grew up knowing of Frida Kahlo's paintings, and when she found out that there were people trying to get it made, she really, really put herself out there and to be cast in it. So when she got involved, she personally secured access to use Kahlo's paintings in the film. She helped assemble the cast, including Alfred Molina, so very deeply involved. She also approached Miramax to make the film, so this is where Harvey Weinstein enters the picture, and he really made life hell for her, and we can talk about that as we discuss the performance maybe. But just to finish up this introduction, Frida is a biopic about Frida Kahlo, played by Salma, Mexican painter who became involved with a fellow painter, Diego Rivera, and it explores their tumultuous relationship through the 30s and 40s against the changing political backdrop. Rivera is a member of the Communist Party, which causes trouble when he's tasked with painting a mural for Nelson Rockefeller. Rivera is frequently cheating on her, but she also is taking on some lovers herself. Plus, we see this incident where she was in an accident that affected her pelvis. So we see how her injury from that impacted her life. And we see several very artfully crafted recreations of her paintings as filmed by the director here, Julie Taymor. So let's get into it. Salma Hayek. Thoughts on Salma Hayek just overall as an actress and her big passion project here in Frida?
Well, I think you watch Frida and you're like, oh my God, Salma Hayek. Like she had the power not just to star in this movie, but to get it made, like you're saying as a producer. And you're like, man, things like did not really progress for her the way that you would think they would after having starred in a best picture or best actress nominee, like multiple Oscar nominee, which we can also get into. Looking at her Wikipedia, like the next movie she makes, like I guess My Kids, I'm not counting. Like she shows up in Grown Ups as someone's wife, Adam Sandler's wife. I can't even remember. Yeah. And then you realize that Harvey Weinstein, his fingerprints are kind of all over that. But like, I don't want to talk about her career in terms of him. Like, I think we have to get to that. Yeah. Like, what she manages to accomplish with Frida, despite the enormous obstacles that it took to get it made, like, it's kind of a miracle of a movie. Yeah, I think it fits really neatly into the biopic box that I think when I think of the early 2000s Oscars, like I think of Iris and hang on, there's more things. I don't want to say The Hours because I think The Hours is different too. But you know what I'm talking about, like the movie, A Beautiful Mind, maybe being like the prime example certainly. Of that. You know, like a Walk big fancy even. Movie, about an important person. But it's got that Julie Taymor magic, which I think has goes in weird directions in many other of her films, but is kind of beautifully deployed here. Like partly because Frida Kahlo is the person to do something with, where you have like a dream sequence of skeletons coming to life, or you have people like posing and turning into their paintings. It fits with the spirit of her work. But it just makes the film feel alive, despite the way that the plot can kind of go like, and then this happened, and then this was a thing, and then Trotsky shows up, and you kind of feel like you're being marched through the beats. And so that's to Julie Taymor's credit, but then again to Salma Hayek's for being able to make this movie exist. Like, I think the performance is less exceptional in the context of that. I think she's very good in it, but I don't think the performance is what makes you drawn to it. It's like knowing what she put into to make this movie possible, that it is her vision and not just Julie Taymor's, that makes this really special.
Yeah, I think you can feel the passion coming through in the film from her. And just overall, I really like Salma Hayek. I think she's very charismatic as an actress, someone who really kind of knows her instrument in a way, like knows how she's perceived and is just interested in sort of playing with those expectations and using her power, I think, to her advantage. So just as a businesswoman, I think she's very savvy. And I think that's, again, an important part of the performance in this project, because you feel the investment with getting it right and treating this very important public figure, this Mexican artist who became this worldwide kind of artist after that, treating her with respect and also exploring some flaws too. And I think what I do enjoy about this movie, which you kind of spoke to, it could have been as dull as the many other biopics we watched during Oscar season. It's just how alive it feels, like how alive she feels as Frida. It's not sort of treating this as like a museum piece necessarily. Like you feel the emotion that she's going through, and she's like a very active participant in her life, and she brings such a feistiness and like a personality to her. Yeah.
There's that shot really early on, it kind of opens toward the end of the film where she's brought in a bed into an art opening, and you kind of don't know like how sick she is or what's going on, and then she kind of like rolls over in the bed and rolls into her younger self. It's like a trick of the camera and of performance to kind of turn her into the student version of Frida, and it's so playful and fun, and like there's like a look in her eye where she's like, okay, here we go, we're gonna take you on this journey. And like that, again, this is the movie that works for. She is the artist to do that for. It's such a better tribute to Frida Kahlo's work than something that would maybe be more dutifully like recreating her paintings, because it has that spirit to it. Yeah. Also, to interrupt you, credit to this movie for treating Alfred Molina as a desirable sex object, because he deserves that. He deserved to have it more. Of course, he was irresistible to anyone who came in a room with him. Good on you, Julie Taymor. Yeah. Julie Taymor, she knew what she was working with. I guess maybe Salma Hayek too, because you were just saying she was instrumental in getting him cast. Very true. Yeah. Well, again, I think sometimes with historical biopics, you do risk making it feel like these people lived a long time ago and they don't really seem to have a lot in common with people today. And like, we kind of, I feel like we just look at them from like a safe distance and like are making our judgments and whatnot. Here, like, it's very active. It's a big, loud performance of someone who was very special and not afraid to take chances wherever she could. And she is like also doing it all with a smile usually. Like, she's not
soured anyway. Like it just has this kind of zest for life, and I think that's what makes her very appealing to watch.
Despite being in like debilitating pain for basically her entire adult life, which is something I don't think most people talk about in context of her work.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, like, even in the beginning, watching Alfred Molina painting like this nude model, or just like marveling at this guy on the streetcar who has gold. It's just like she has this thirst for knowledge, this feeling of like wanting to know more about the world and like talk philosophy and art with Diego Luna, little baby Diego Luna here. Especially baby-faced here. But
he didn't stand a chance. She was going to kick him to the curb in a minute.
Yeah, right. But it's like that classic wide-eyed sort of future artist thing that she's tapping into, but making it feel genuine and not too forced in that stereotypical sort of biopic way. So I like that.
That's what leads her to sleeping with Trotsky, played by Jeffrey Rush, who shows up late in the movie. And she's so interested in his brain and what he knows. And then, they wind up sleeping together because that is how people operate in this world.
Apparently. Yes. Yeah. I think she is just able to make her into this person who is very passionate about her work, who advocates for herself and speaks with just a confidence. She's never hiding away or shying away, even with Rivera at first, like when she asks like for advice on her art. And she's like fully pushes back at him when he's too vague in his critique. I love how she portrays that sort of stubbornness of being like, look, am I wasting my time or not? Because if I am, like, I have other means. I have people to feed in my family,
Yeah.
So I really just enjoy all of that. Do we like her chemistry with Alfred Molina? Because I think they fit pretty perfectly.
Yeah. Oh, they're perfect. They're like, the way that he kind of shows up to her, he's just like, I can't like stop sleeping around with everyone who comes in my path. Like, can you deal with that? And like, she wants to think that it's true. And he's so like, he is kind of exactly who he says he's going to be the whole time, but that doesn't make you any less mad at him. But you get why he is someone who like everyone wants to sleep with, and who also like became this big celebrity, right? Before she was ever a famous painter, he was, and was being, commissioned by millionaires who probably had no business trying to get him to paint his communist propaganda on their walls. No, he's really wonderful in this movie. And like, we, know that he's been wonderful in a lot of different things, but like, this isn't a show about Alfred Molina, but like, where does this fall in his like rise? Like, is this kind of a revelation performance for audiences for him at this point?
Sort of. I mean, he had done Chocolat like 2 years before this, and he was kind of a prominent role in that.
Okay.
But this was also, I mean, Spider-Man is coming very soon.
Spider-Man is coming very soon. I know that. Yeah. He's not the first one.
Yeah. So, I think this was probably the closest he came to an Oscar nomination. Unfortunately, it didn't happen for him. Like, he got Globe nominated, SAG nominated, and just, I'm not sure what happened here, because like Frida got 6 nominations. It got 2 wins in the end. So like, where was the love for Alfred Molina?
Yeah, so who sneaks in supporting actors? Like, was Paul Newman
probably
there
John
all
C.
along?
Reilly.
John C. Reilly. Yeah. I mean, we're going to talk about Chicago, and that's let's talk about people who are having a good year. John C. Reilly.
Yes,
having
probably
a good
the
one.
best. Yeah. But I do actually wanted to note this early conversation that the two of them have, where he says he wants to marry her, and we've established that she doesn't really fully want to be married, and she doesn't fully believe in it earlier in the film, but she's just so head over heels that she agrees, but not before, laying down the law and being like, you have to be loyal to me, and for as big as his reputation is, she feels like maybe she's going to be the one for him, that she's his number one. But then, of course, she's learning very quickly after that he's not all that. And his ex-wife at the wedding, and it's just a mess.
Who was kind of like Frida's best ally at some point, the ex-wife who lives upstairs. Does he sleep with her sister before or after they get married? It's like, is it after that conversation?
That would be after.
Yeah, okay. I was going to say, I was going to like wonder if like she kind of reneged on the terms of their deal, like if he really was staying loyal. But I do think sleeping with her sisters is a bridge too far.
It's a red flag.
Yeah. That's one way to put it.
But I think it's just, to speak to your point, I think there's a little bit of a missed opportunity at times for me to really fully explore. I'm not sure what exactly it is that the performance is missing, so much as maybe it's just the film itself, but you kind of want a little bit more from it. compared to the rest of these nominees, perhaps?
Yeah, it's a good question of trying to diagnose like what isn't there. It's something in the story, right? Like,
Yeah.
if you have it be just about the Trotsky period or just about when they're in New York, or like it's trying to cover so much ground that's where I think it kind of like you get toward the end and you're just like, okay, we're just like marching our way toward death here. It's almost like you want them to go further into their really specific vision for what this could be. And like maybe there was a version of that. Should we talk about Salma Hayek's New York Times op-ed that kind of reveals what it took to get this movie made?
I think it's inevitable that we have to bring that into it, unfortunately. So yeah, she wrote this op-ed in 2017 in the New York Times after those allegations against Harvey seemed like, were finally sticking. So he apparently wanted Salma to take a shower with him, oral sex, and just like film a fully nude sex scene with a woman in the film. And he berated her performance. He said all she had was her sex appeal, and there was none of that in the film. There was another.
He said like these impossible he was like, to get this movie made, you got to get like 4 name actors to agree to be in it, and like make it for under a budget or whatever. And then that's how she gets Antonio Banderas, Ashley Judd, Edward Norton, who she was dating at the time, and who she says like really contributed to the script, and who's the
Jeffrey
fourth?
Rush.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Which like she manages to pull off with like, she has connections in the industry at this point, but that's like a pretty big feat. So he basically keeps setting these hurdles that he thinks will be impossible for her to clear, and she clears it, including like threatening to not even put the movie in theaters at the end.
Yeah, it's really rough. Yeah, and
then it gets 6 Oscar nominations, and you're like, okay, great genius of independent film.
Yeah, exactly. No, but he's like dragging her out of a party at the Venice Film Festival, she said. He threatened to kill her at one point and made things very difficult for Julie Taymor.
Yeah.
And yeah, like they tested it in one theater because he's like, I don't even know if I want to put it in theaters. And it tested really well. So then it became like a solid art house hit. And so, yeah, just also on top of that, he, is putting Miramax's resources all behind Chicago and The Hours, and I guess also Gangs of New York. But in terms of Best Actress, like it was a real uphill battle, I think, for her to even get this nomination. Probably more so than most performances that get nominated in the modern era. At least.
Not to mention even just being a non-white woman at this point, or any point in the Oscar history, is hard to do. Yeah.
Yeah, so it kind of feels like she sort of got this by the skin of her teeth in many ways.
Well, and when you watch the ceremony, which I think you did more recently than I do, like Frida wins. Was it when makeup and costume really close together?
Makeup and original score.
Oh yeah, such a great score. It's so like those wins come close together in the ceremony, and you see Salma Hayek just beaming in the audience there. And there's like a 15-minute period where you're like, wow, Frida, like this is the night of Frida. And it like doesn't win anything else, but it does. Like that felt like such a huge victory for her, even though she doesn't win this prize.
Oh, yeah. And I don't think either of them thanked Harvey Weinstein, which is correct.
Yeah.
Because it's Salma's baby, really. And I think everyone kind of knew that. So,
like has she produced anything recently? Like I know her acting career has been, kind of hit or miss because, she can
I think she's a pretty active producer behind the scenes, even when things she's not in.
Yeah, like I just feel like what she was able to do with that, and like she has access to, a very substantial fortune because of who she is married to now. Like I just feel like there's a lot of potential for what she could be doing that I'm excited to see what else she could bring us.
Yeah, especially now when it feels like more actresses are taking on those producer roles or at least are more allowed to do that. Yeah. So, yeah, she was a tiny bit ahead of her time in that regard, perhaps.
Definitely.
But yeah, I think it's a really, really good performance, like no complaints about it. And I think it is probably her defining role, that just looking back.
Yeah. Well, again, like a lot of her on-screen roles, like it just, didn't go in maybe as many directions as they potentially could have. She's really great in the Puss in Boots movies, as the most recent one that came out. Obviously she's great in House of Gucci, but yes, I think in terms of like real like showing the extent of what she can do, this is the one.
Yeah, absolutely. So shall we move on to our next nominee?
Sure.
Okay. Diane Lane in Unfaithful. So our other one-timer nominee as of now, Diane Lane, born in New York City. Her father was involved in acting and running in the same circle as John Cassavetes. Her film debut was A Little Romance when she was 13 years old, starring alongside Laurence Olivier, who hailed her as the next Grace Kelly. No pressure. And she had her breakout with The Outsiders and Rumblefish. She got an Emmy nomination for Lonesome Dove, which gave her a little bit of a boost. Kind of a little bit rocky going forward from there in the 90s, but she got some acclaim in 1999 for A Walk on the Moon, which she got an Independent Spirit Award for. Going into the 21st century, she's in My Dog Skip. She's in The Perfect Storm. Yep. The Glass House, Hardball. And then she has this huge moment in 2002 with Unfaithful, which is an Adrian Lyne film. This is Adrian Lyne's other Best Actress nominee after Glenn Close in Fatal Attraction. Probably not going to have another one, but I guess we'll see. Moving forward, it didn't quite happen for Ana de Armas. But he cast her after seeing her performance in A Walk on the Moon. And she had a quote where he said, "She breathes a certain sexuality, but she's sympathetic." So that's interesting.
Sure.
Yeah.
But she's sympathetic. Like that that quote coming from Adrian Lyne is slightly distressing.
Right.
And it's okay to say and.
Yeah, right. But the film is about this seemingly happy couple, Edward and Connie, played by Richard Gere and Diane Lane. But they're living in New York City. They have money. They have a young son. Their marriage is a little routine, but not maybe dysfunctional necessarily. But one day, Connie bumps into an attractive man named Paul, played by Olivier Martinez. So because she has wounds on her legs, he invites her up to his apartment to tend to them, and they quickly develop an intense connection. And she keeps going back to his apartment, where they eventually have sex, and it becomes an affair. And Connie reckons with just having this secret affair, not telling her husband, but she's not quite able to keep this up because Edward eventually finds out about it and confronts him. So let's talk Diane Lane. Thoughts on Diane Lane overall and her performance here in Unfaithful?
I love A Walk on the Moon. I had just absolutely my mom like really connected with that movie, and I saw it because of her like before Unfaithful came out. It took me a long time after this to be like, oh no, she has like a famous teen. Like, is she in that infamous 80s Oscar show of Future Stars? Yes, you're nodding. Oh, she's not. Okay, but she could have been. Like,
I
she
thought
was
you were
very
gonna
much
mention like the Brat Pack.
Oh,
of,
no, but like
the Outsiders crew.
Yes, but she like very much could have been in that like period,
She could have
being
been.
like, you are a star of tomorrow. And yeah, I mean, Unfaithful becomes such a huge banner for her. Like, I really did set her up on movies that like aren't as good as Unfaithful, but like I think the like Under the Tuscan Sun, Nights in Rodanthe, she made this movie with Kevin Costner a little while ago. Apparently, like she kind of did like find a lane off of this that Diane Lane,
Very good.
that is like not as interesting as Unfaithful, but like does tap into being like, oh yeah, like she is a woman who can like be self-possessed and be an adult, but still kind of like have sensuality to her and like have like a, you know, a sense of kind of yearning for something else. It is hilarious to me that they position like her and Richard Gere as having like a very kind of like boring marriage, because they're having sex all the time, like including like in a bathtub, like with their child, like just miraculously going to bed. I mean, they're in a movie, so like they have all this free time that nobody else would otherwise have. But anyway, they seem perfectly fine to me. Although he is weird and jealous, which is how everything starts to fall apart. Because he starts like tailing her with a private eye, like based on, I can't remember, like he has like some valid suspicion, but not that valid. Like it really feels like he could just, like chill a little bit, even though he's right. Yeah. But yeah, I had seen this movie in 2002. I remember when I started college, my RA was like, yeah, the house in that movie Unfaithful, like that was my friend's house. And I was like, whoa. So now rewatching it, I was like, damn, that's a nice house.
It is.
And yeah, it's like exactly the kind of movie I think we complain about them not making anymore. Adrian Lyne really excelled at that, and then made one a couple years ago that nobody liked. And it's like tense and sexy, and everyone is great in it, like all the three main players in it. It's got like a really like evocative mood, which I don't think I gave it credit for in my memory. Like I wouldn't have thought of the style as being such a big part of it. I love that it starts with a dramatic windstorm on the level of the one at the end of Challengers. Like that's clearly where the idea for all the paper flying around at the end of Challengers
it's like a tornado.
came from. Well, isn't there like there's a bunch of wind in Far From Heaven too, right? Like we'll get there,
Yeah.
but I feel like the winds of change coming around for everybody.
Wow.
In 2002.
Yeah.
I had such a great time with Unfaithful, but I feel like you having the context of this more, like this is such an unusual kind of nomination for this period of the Oscars, and it makes you treasure it even more.
Absolutely. Oh, yes. Yeah, I mean, I really enjoy Diane Lane. She is one of those actresses for me where it's like, whenever she shows up in something, I'm like, oh yeah, Diane Lane is actually like this stealth player because like she's beautiful. There's this sort of sharpness that's kind of fun to watch. And this role is so tailor-made for her strengths. And yeah, this is, again, one of the films I hadn't seen from this lineup before. And the way you look back on races like this, I feel like is sometimes a little unfair because it's like she wasn't a front runner. She probably wasn't even close to being like top 2 or 3. So I guess I had an image in my mind of being like, well, you know, she's probably very effective in this, but maybe not all that outstanding, like a filler nominee. But watching this, it actually really shocked me how good she is.
Yeah, because movies like this don't get to be filler nominees, right? Like this is a movie, I think it came out in the summer, like it's not a fall, at least it wasn't in like the period of, you know, being shoved down your throat. I think we can talk about The Hours as being the one where it's like, here is the movie you will vote for. And Unfaithful is not that at all. So to get nominated from a movie like this, you really got to bring it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, I think this is really nuanced work, actually, within a movie that could have been very disposable and trashy even without her. Just the way she's able to find her way into this character that seems kind of tricky on the page is really impressive to me because it's like she seems perfectly happy in this marriage, and if not happy, at least content. Like she doesn't seem like someone who would feel this urge to cheat. You know, there's nothing overtly wrong with Edward as we're introduced to him. Maybe some of their interactions, he seems a little smug at times, and you know, but that's maybe just a Richard Gere thing. I don't know. But you know, I think with Adrian Lyne's sort of vision, you also have to be a little bit uncertain about it too. Like, what are her motives? I think it's in that gray area that I think she really succeeds in just showing how this woman is sort of finding herself again and is finding some kind of like satisfaction in being treated as this sexual person and just being worshipped by this like gorgeous fantasy man in a way.
Well, she's like finding herself again, but also is really tormented by it at the same time. Like there's like, it's like this, there's not like I mean, I guess you see them like kind of like going around town and going to lunch, but there's just this danger to every single moment of it. And like her self-recrimination, you know, that really, the scene that was so famous at the time was like her riding home on the train and kind of thinking back, like you don't see them have sex for the first time. You cut to her being on the train and then she kind of thinking back on it. And the range of emotions that are playing on her face as she thinks back on it, like it's exceptional and it sets the tone for the entire movie. I think you're exactly right that the movie is much less interesting without her in it.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I think there's something that she pulls off so well, which is to be so kind of like Sphinx-like in a way in her expressions where you're like, now what's going on in her mind at this moment? But in other scenes like the trade scene, she is so expressive and is just like almost reliving this first sexual experience with him.
Yeah. Well, I think that like this performance feels even braver now, like with like much less sex in movies. Like I was thinking about Emma Stone in Poor Things and how like she is very brave in that movie. There are a lot of sex scenes in that movie. Those are not easy to do, but there is like a comic tone to almost all of them that makes it safer in some way. Like I think it's the last sex scene she has with what's his name? The guy she's having an affair with. Like in the hallway that is so vulnerable and like intense and like hard to watch. And it's that tone you just so rarely see. And to see an actress like, you know, she's not as famous then as she is now because she gets the Oscar nomination for this, but for her to really put herself out for that and like make that scene feel real, it's brave. And it was then and it is now.
Yeah, absolutely. And even their first sexual encounter when he's like touching her stomach and her legs, and you really feel this like unbelievable charge that he's giving her, and her that her reliving that on the train, like it really feels like it is awakening something in her that she didn't know was there. So, yeah.
No, watching this for the first time, did the turn that it takes in the second half throw you?
Yes.
Okay.
Because I apparently went however long it's been, 22 years, not knowing that would happen.
Not knowing that snow globes play a big role. Spoiler alert, snow globes.
Snow globes are huge. And Richard Gere is very impulsive and has a lot of feelings. And that definitely
men will
took a
literally
turn
kill their wife's lover with snow globe instead of going to therapy. It's something like that.
Very much so, yes. But I did actually want to go back to another scene of her where I think she's great is when she's in the bathtub, which I think is like this masterclass of like subtle reacting where she's still kind of like feeling herself after another encounter. And then she notices this like drawing that Paul had made on her body.
What a moron,
Sharpie,
dude. I can't believe that guy did that to her. Like,
I know. Yes.
Have some boundaries.
Yeah, as she was like sleeping, I think.
Yeah.
But she hadn't noticed it until now and just like trying to rub it away. And then Edward walks in and is like joining her in the tub, and she's just like doing her best to play it cool and like nothing's changed. It's all good. Like, I think that's so well done. And especially when she kind of like freezes up a little bit when he tries to get a little intimate with her. Yeah. And you see all of it in her face. You understand exactly, you know, how she's trying to like not give away too much.
Yeah, and like the movie, everything kind of comes out into the open later on, and there becomes less tension between the two of them. But like, even as they kind of become a more united front, kind of trying to move on from what's happened, like she's still holding a lot back. Like, you are really asked to read a lot about her headspace just by looking at her face, which is really fascinating. Like, it doesn't, and it has a really ambiguous ending, which I think is really powerful. And I think she sets the tone again to make that ending land the way that it does.
I agree. Yeah. One other thing I wanted to mention is just this one scene with Kate Burton and Margaret Collin, which is very funny, playing these like two older women friends of hers who insist they have lunch with her, even though she's like on her way to meet Paul again. Yeah. And he meets her at like the restaurant and they have sex in the bathroom. And it's just like this dangerous sort of sexiness and confidence she feels, and she's walking out is great. And like, maybe some of the writing is a little clunky where they're talking very directly about here are all the moral implications of having an affair. And it's like, well, I mean, I don't know. I don't think someone like you could see Connie feeling like that guilt sink in that moment. That's where I'm sort of like, I feel like she was already kind of like thinking about some of this to some extent. I guess it's different when like a friend is vocalizing that, but still, anyway. Yeah. I just enjoy that scene.
No, it's she makes so many bad decisions in there. Like, I know that having an affair in the first place is a bad decision, but going into the bathroom, like, that man clearly has some power over her. Like, I think you do get that charge between them, but you're also like, come on, lady, get it together. Bad choice. Yeah,
I know. One other note I made actually is that when the cops come eventually and they're asking about Paul's whereabouts, like, you know, when she last saw him, and I think she's so good at not letting on, not panicking, not giving any sort of tells on her face. And there's something in moments like that where I was like, Diane Lane would have been incredible in like a 2002 version of Gone Girl. Like, I kept thinking about that through a lot of this movie.
That is a really good point. Did you watch any of Feud, the Capote versus the Swans?
Yeah.
She's really great in that too. Like,
she's my MVP.
Not like a similar performance, I don't think. But yeah, I was really glad to see her get to jump into something recently.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And to get back to that final moment in the car, I think when they are discussing like fleeing to Mexico and like taking on new identities, you can feel from her tone and from her face that she'll never fully be over this. Like, she'll never escape what happened. Yeah. I think all of that is a nice place to end on for some ambiguity.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess like they're like at a traffic light and you see the light turn green and the car still doesn't move. And you're like, we're just going to be stuck here forever. It's great.
And in the background, there's a police station.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. They're trying to decide if they're going to walk in there.
Yeah. So really, really interesting movie. Wish anything like this was made today. Just
Yeah.
Good or bad.
It would be interesting to revisit Dark Water, having now watched this, to see if like you see any of the same things. I just like I don't think there was anything as interesting in that movie as what you get in Unfaithful.
Yeah, but I believe there was like a Tracy Letts like flying off a cliff with a car at one point, so that I did find interesting.
I forgot all about that.
Yes.
Thank you for reminding me of it.
Yes, of course. On that note, I think we should move on to our next nominee.
Yeah.
Julianne Moore in Far From Heaven.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Julianne Moore is having a banner year. She's already getting her third and fourth Oscar nominations this year, and her first nomination was in 97, so that's 4 nominations in 6 years. So this is a very special time for Julianne Moore. Since her nomination for The End of the Affair, which we talked about on the 99 episode, she's in the shipping news, failed Oscar bait. She's taking over as Clarice Starling in Hannibal. I would say neither of those go particularly well for her, but 2002 is a huge moment where she's in Far From Heaven and The Hours, 2 films in which she is very specifically playing a housewife living in the 1950s. Still kind of boggles my mind that it happened that way for her in the same year. But
has she ever like given a quote being like, well, I took one and then the other came? Like, has she explained how that happened in the same year?
I'm sure this was addressed at some point.
Yeah,
but yeah,
I would love to
wild.
raise. I would assume it's like, well, Todd Haynes calls after she's already committed to The Hours. She's like, well, I'm not going to say no to Todd. So here we go.
Right, exactly. But she gets that supporting nomination for The Hours. We'll talk about The Hours soon. Yeah. But Far From Heaven is Julianne reuniting with Todd Haynes, who she last worked with on Safe. And Far From Heaven is an homage to the Douglas Sirk melodramas of the 50s, including one that we talked about on this very series, Magnificent Obsession. So we have the heightened emotions, we have this intentional use of color, score, everything about it is evoking the era where it's taking place. So Julianne Moore plays Kathy Whitaker, a housewife living in suburban Connecticut in the 50s. Her life seems to be perfect. She has the 2 kids. She has friends in her community. She has a seemingly happy relationship with her husband, Frank, Dennis Quaid. But one day after her husband calls and says that he's going to be late, she goes to his office to surprise him and finds him kissing another man. And naturally, this alarms her, and he tries to go to therapy in the hope of curing himself of his sexual preferences. Meanwhile, Kathy develops a friendship with her new gardener, Raymond, played by Dennis Haysbert, a black man. And people in her community start to whisper about her relationship with Raymond, and it becomes a scandal when they are spotted together going to a restaurant and causes her to be shunned by her community. So let's get into it here. Far From Heaven. Very excited to be talking about a Todd Haynes film, one of my favorite directors. But thoughts on Miss Julianne Moore and her great year and her performance here in Far From Heaven?
Yeah, doing the Oscars and Todd Haynes is just going to set you up for heartbreak over and over again, because even his Oscar
just
history
happened last year.
Like as time goes by from Far From Heaven, like it gets more and more possible and then not. And yes, I mean, in May, December proved that our hearts can still be broken. But he and Julianne Moore had been, bros for over a decade at this point. Like he saw something in her, not that other people didn't see. Like she's great in Boogie Nights, like she's working with really great directors, but what they are able to do together is really, really special. I think Far From May December's example of that, and Far From Heaven is just kind of the pinnacle of it in a lot of ways. Like you don't want to compare her performance in this to the one in The Hours, like in terms of like how it works technically, because no, they're not just different characters, but those movies are so different in what they're accomplishing. Like Far From Heaven is walking this incredibly thin line from parody to homage, and it nails every single moment that it could. Like it asks you to seriously invest in this incredibly artificial world and finds the most intense, real human emotions in a place that doesn't really resemble reality at all. And that was the power of Douglas Sirk. So the fact that like Douglas Sirk does it first and then Todd Haynes comes and redoes it in an homage and still gets all of that emotion out of it. It's not just Julianne Moore. Dennis Haysbert is wonderful in this movie. Dennis Quaid's really great in this movie, and I don't think gets that much credit for it. But she's just like, they are so in sync. Like you can't just put any actress into this spot. I think the way that she knows the Todd Haynes and the way that she has that kind of like trembling quality to her, where kind of like Diane Lane, she can be holding everything in. Like her face in Far From Heaven is even more of a mask than Diane Lane in Unfaithful. Like she is kind of rigidly put into the world that she is in. And so when you see it break, like when you see her and Dennis Haysbert get into the woods, when you see them kind of escape from the world that they're in, it's kind of all the more remarkable to watch just the smallest change happen in her. I got to revisit this movie for the first time in a while, like a year or two ago, and was just like, it's not even just that it holds up. Like, I think it just becomes richer the more movies you see, maybe the more time goes on, the older you get. Like, it's such a rich text. It has so much more than just her performance, but it, like, again, it wouldn't work nearly as well without her, who just knows exactly how to play it.
Yeah, I absolutely love this movie. I think it is one of the best looking films of the 21st century, honestly. Just what Ed Lachman is able to do in evoking that Douglas Sirk style without it feeling out of place at all in a movie released in 2002. I think it's just incredible. Just a visual feast. Just the fact that Ed Lachman didn't win cinematography for this, I think, is kind of a crime.
What won cinematography? Hang on, I'm looking it up.
I think it was Road to Perdition.
I mean, a posthumous Oscar
Conrad,
for Are you really going to fight hard on that?
Yes.
Fair enough.
He already won for American Beauty. It's fine.
That's true. He had like just one. You're right.
Yeah. Anyway. So much, all due respect to Mr. Conrad Hall. But I think yes, it's just such a beautifully made film with really great performances that do match that old fashioned style, but also really hold up, I think, to a modern audience. And Julianne Moore, what she does, I think, is kind of miraculous, honestly. Like what she channels is in like the tradition of Celia Johnson in Brief Encounter, of Jane Wyman in All That Heaven Allows, just like these women who are in these like very impossible situations, who really desperately want to live their life in peace, but like society is so oppressive and so judgmental that you really just feel for them. I think what you first notice for me in the performance is just how much she nails that 50s precision in her voice, her mannerisms, and it never feels, to me at least, like a caricature. It's just like this smoothness. I don't know exactly how to describe it, but it just is so evocative of that post-war era, and just like the elegance and the femininity and just like the manners of it all.
It's like it's the post-war era that was put on film, right? It's like
Yes,
she's not evoking
that's true.
a person
Good
who
point.
ever existed, but something who we have been told, and moviegoers at home were told to exist. And the fact that there is daylight between the two, and she's like doing both at the same time, is crazy.
Yeah, it's a kind of a magic trick.
Yeah.
But yeah, then she gives that like hint of melancholy, I think, that shows through even before the incident happens. Like everything just seems a little too, placid, even though she may feel like, she has a very happy life without any more overt concerns than anyone else. But there is just that little sense of like something is slightly off here that she communicates without, anything said, really. It's just her face.
Yeah. Yeah. God, you know what? It's occurring. This is such a different movie, but like, it's kind of like Barbie, where she's in this world that seems like entirely made to serve her. And there's just like something nagging at the back of her head. And like the performance in Barbie is very different, but I'm now wondering for the first time if Greta Gerwig watched Far From Heaven to get at that, because it does feel right.
Yes. What was Kathy Whittaker made for? That is the question.
That is what she's asking herself.
Yeah. But I think her chemistry with Raymond, I think, really unfolds very naturally as they get to know each other. I think her and Dennis Haysbert really, really complement each other, just in this feeling of like, there's like this shared sense of decency that they have. It's obviously established that even her talking to a black man at this time makes her kind of different in her community, and they kind of make fun of her for being liberal. And I feel like her interactions with him are just so fascinating to watch, because it doesn't feel like she is like having this forced gentility or anything. It's just like this person treating another person with respect, which I think is important to establish, even though she has a few moments where it's like classic sort of white woman talking to black man kind of situation, where she's like, oh, I support the NAACP. I thought you ought to know. things like that.
But she has this naivete about what their relationship can be that kind of like grows over the course of it. And he is so much more realistic about it. Like he knows what it would be to bring her into an all black space far more than she can ever anticipate, because she just has no framework for knowing about it at all. And it's such an interesting dynamic because you are rooting for her awakening to the world around her, but like through his performance, you're kind of always aware of the limits that are around that, even when she's not. And it makes that romance so affecting. I love that you brought up Celia Johnson in Brief Encounter, because it's such a good example of like a relationship where two people are saying the right things back to each other, but what is not being said is what the actual conversation is. That's such a great example of it. And yeah, I feel like this is like just an updated version of that, basically.
Very much so, which is why I love it, because I adore that movie.
Yeah.
But the part where she is visiting his office, Frank's office, and sees him kissing the man, I think the shock of that is really great, because it is within the confines of this being like the classic melodrama. So like the look on her face, it's very clear what she's thinking, but it still feels grounded in reality, especially in the conversation she has with him when he finally comes home, basically like with his tail between his legs, and she can like barely even look at him. But she's still just like, I'm gonna try to work this out in a sensible way. And like they come to this conclusion that he's gonna see the doctor about his attractions, and even when they go there after he comes out, she's like, oh well, he seemed like a very nice doctor and everything, like how do you think this is gonna go? And it's just like so fragile how she portrays her.
Yeah, well, she's like trying to like build back a world that doesn't really exist, and she doesn't know that, but like that kind of like over the course of the movie, it's her realizing that like what she's lost was not real in the first place, and she'll have to start from something different. Like, I mean, that like gorgeous symbolism at the end of the movie of like the trees changing into something different, where you can like see a new world starting. It's so beautiful and like works so well, again, with like this really highly artificial style. It does so much to capture that kind of sense of stifling of the world that Katey lives in.
Oh yes. Yeah, I love all the moments when she is kind of being tested. And, you know, when they're throwing that big sort of soiree at their house, and Frank is kind of like insulting her and says to these other guests something about her looks, like you should see her when she's, you know, in the morning or whatever. And she's like very quietly playing it off. I think that's such a huge part of the performance, is sort of playing off and sort of covering up those harsher elements. And like even when like that same party, they're talking about integration, and she's clearly a bit like uneasy, and she kind of disagrees with their stance, but she's like gracefully like playing it off, changing the subject. But you know, then after the party, when Frank tries to like force himself to have sex with her and he can't, you know, operate it, and he hits her,
blames her for his own problems.
But her just saying like, oh, it was an accident, and like doing her hair a different way. And so her friend, even when she shows concern, like you can feel like those cracks forming, and causing her to have that little cry to herself in the bushes. It's
well, when you're friends with Patricia Clarkson, you can't hide anything. Like, unfortunately, if she's really around, like, she's going to call you on your shit at every opportunity, which I respect. I think every community needs that person, as scary as they can be, to find out all your secrets.
And she's another one I wish got a little more traction, because I think she's so good here.
Well, I mean, I guess we got to talk about the hours to kind of make sense of all of this. It's, you know, it's one of those things that, like, when you have something else out there that's like more palatable and more visible, and having to like choose your lane. And also like, I kind of just circle back to the Todd Haynes thing. Like, this is such an interesting, like, I'm no expert on like queer cinema and what that means, but like, this is such an interesting entry in that, because on the surface, it seems like very classical kind of period piece, but there is a queerness to this movie that then when you realize this is the same Academy that couldn't handle Brokeback Mountain 2 years later, like they weren't ready for this. And her, like the fact that it got nominated at all maybe is kind of a miracle given where the Academy was at this point. I
know.
And yeah, you can wish that it got more traction, but kind of know the limitations of what was possible then. And I mean, and again, given May December now.
Yeah. I wish we could say we had evolved to the point of fully appreciating and understanding Todd Haynes, but
I mean, are we meant to understand Todd Haynes? Isn't he meant to kind of zig and zag and surprise us at every turn?
This is true.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's not for everyone, and maybe it's better that way.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think that's a good way to put it. But yeah, I mean, not that the nomination has to be the win. Like, I don't know where you land on that doing this project so that you can want more from them, but like it is such a special performance, and it was such a breakthrough for Todd Haynes. Like, again, this is the first movie of his that I ever saw. Like, the fact that it went this distance really meant a lot.
I think so. Yeah. I wish it could have picked up a win anywhere. Like,
how many
I look at all
nominations
the nominations it got. I'm like, it gets 4 nominations. So actress, original screenplay for Todd, cinematography, and original score for Elmer Bernstein.
And then Dennis Quaid, another supporting actor who just
who also got a lot of precursor traction and was overlooked. Yeah. So I feel like that was kind of a death knell maybe to Julianne's chances when even he didn't get in.
Yeah.
Because he had been along for the ride for...
You can certainly imagine, like, as more and more voters are like, what's this like movie I'm gonna see? Like it's skating along, and then more people are like, oh God, absolutely not. I don't understand it at all. Like, I'm just imagining a stereotypical Oscar voter there. And you know, it's unfair to people like Dennis Quaid who get left out in the process.
Yeah, exactly. But by the end, I think she really is so heartbreaking. I love what she does with her voice when after all this has gone on and he's wanting to divorce her, and he calls her at one point because he's now off to be with this man who wants to be with him. But when he calls her and talks about like their divorce and all of the lightness and the sort of breathy tone that she had in the beginning is gone. And I think it's just like this very solemn, like slightly deeper tone because she's just spent.
Yeah.
She's totally just, you know, she's lost her husband. She lost Raymond at this point. She's lost her social circle. She's even lost her best friend, you know?
Yeah.
And she's just tired. And you can feel that evolution, I think, over time.
Yeah, that's the Julianne Moore power. She can be all of those things in one performance. And
the train station sequence at the end, I think, is incredible.
Again, with Brief Encounter. If you have a movie where there are people on a train platform and they cannot be together, it's right to the center of my being.
It's a breathtaking shot, I think. There's a reason they would use that on like the poster.
Yeah.
But just the face of it's just total sorrow.
Oh, and my God.
I wonder where Kathy Whittaker goes from here, you know?
Do you think that she stays in Connecticut? I mean, obviously, like her husband's like
should
gone off.
leave the state, honestly. I think she should start over fresh.
Start fresh, yeah. Actually, so we talked about this on Little Gold Men, my Vanity Fair podcast a couple of years ago. It's like a Pride-themed flashback, and I think Richard Loss, my co-host, was like, you know, maybe like Dennis Quaid and his boyfriend, they moved to New York, and then like Kathy and Dennis Haysbert, like they moved to New York with the kids, and the kids grow up to be bohemians, and everyone has a happy ending. And that's not the movie. That's not the ending that makes sense for this movie, but you can wish for it at the same time.
We love that fantasy world.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Absolutely love that performance. If anyone hasn't seen Far From Heaven, please seek it out.
Absolutely.
Especially if you have that knowledge of Douglas Sirk and his filmography. I think that only enhances it.
Yeah.
So now let's get to our final losing nominee of this group, Renée Zellweger in Chicago. So this is going to be a fun one. This is Renée getting her second Oscar nomination in a row, both times in Best Actress, and this time leading what would become the Best Picture winner. So she is red hot in her career right now, and you know, there's not too much to update in between Bridget Jones's Diary and this, other than that she's also in White Oleander earlier in 2002. So having a moment. Chicago is, of course, based on the famous stage musical from 1975, which was itself based on a play from the 20s. There was a revival in 1996, which is sort of what led to this renewed interest in adapting it as a film.
It's still running, right? Like that revival is what is still on Broadway. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. And so a lot of actresses were considered to play Roxy Hart. Rob Marshall is actually quoted as saying, "For Roxy, I saw 10 or more women. Marissa Tomei, Mira Sorvino, Charlize Theron, Christina Applegate, Jennifer Jason Leigh, Toni Collette, who was fabulous, and that gorgeous Mila Jovovich.
Wow.
That's a direct quote from Rob Marshall.
Why you gotta be weird about it, Rob Marshall? Come on.
That gorgeous Mila Jovovich. Yeah. A lot of sliding doors moments, I think, if any of those were
My brain
cast.
just spun.
I know. But apparently, Harvey Weinstein was very instrumental in having him cast Renée, this being a Miramax film. So what makes this casting fascinating is that Renée, self-professed, couldn't dance. She couldn't really sing, at least on the level of what was needed for like leading a musical of this nature. But she trained for it, she put in the work, and she made it happen. So Chicago is set in 1920s Chicago, where Roxy Hart, played by Renée, is an aspiring entertainer for vaudeville, and she hopes her lover, who she's cheating on with her husband, who will get her a gig at a local club. But when he says he never spoke to them and had no intention to do so, he pushes her around and she shoots him dead. And she confesses to the crime and she's sent to prison. And as she awaits trial, she meets her idol, Velma Kelly, Catherine Zeta-Jones. And she hires Billy Flynn, Richard Gere, as her lawyer, who likes to manipulate the facts to help his clients. And together they manipulate the press in her favor. And the musical sequences of the film are, for the most part, presented as Roxy's imagining of events that are going on in her life. So this is a big, bold swing from Renée, and this is our Best Picture winner, of course. So tell me your thoughts on Renée Zellweger and Chicago.
I'm not going to say a single bad word against Renée Zellweger. I don't know that I would have done that at the time. I feel like she got a lot of heat for not having as strong a singing voice as Catherine Zeta-Jones, not being as good a dancer as Catherine Zeta-Jones. I think that I think that leans into the nature of the character really well. Kind of the way that anybody can be Sally Bowles, because Sally Bowles isn't supposed to be like the most talented person. Like Roxy Hart's a striver. Right. She's a wannabe. And Renée Zellweger has that energy so beautifully. That arc of Roxy from kind of watching Velma wide-eyed to kind of getting her feet under her to becoming such a little shit in the jail thinking that she's like the king of the mountain is so fantastic. And what she commits herself into doing in these musical numbers where she's at the center of it, I think We Both Reach for the Gun is just this comic masterpiece that is again a ton thanks to her performance, even though Richard Gere is at the center of it. And then Roxy is the name of the song, right, that she sings. Mm-hmm. Yeah. She's wonderful in that. Again, it doesn't, I don't think innate talent at these things, A, matters for the character, or B, matters that much when you're committing yourself to a performance to that extent. And she and Catherine Zeta-Jones, I think, are such an essential contrast to each other. You cannot have those characters be too much alike. And their banter back and forth in the scenes that they get to share together, they're coming from such different places and landing right in the middle. We'll talk about Catherine Zeta-Jones. I know it's not her category, but she's also tremendous in this movie. Mm-hmm. I think that Rob Marshall has gotten this reputation, I think earned since then, of making musicals that don't really feel like they're alive in a way. And when I revisited Chicago for the first time a couple years ago, I kind of expected to be it's too much editing, it's all chopped up. And there's a little bit of that, but it's a really, really good musical with really great performances, great songs, obviously. And I don't know that Renée Zellweger is the center of it. There's so many pieces that build this thing, but I just think she's completely up to the task. And in terms of the tone, in terms of the actual acting part of it, I think she's exceptional.
Yeah. So this is a performance that I've really had an up and down relationship with over the years. I think when I first saw Chicago, I was so impressed by the technical craft, the musical sequences, Catherine Zeta-Jones being fabulous, Queen Latifah's number, this kind of fun satirical tone they have where it's commenting about the media and all that. And I feel like Renée's performance got a little lost in the shuffle for me. Not to say she was bad at all. It just wasn't really the takeaway for me at first.
Had you ever seen Chicago before you saw the movie?
No.
Me neither. This is the only version I've ever seen. I never saw it on Broadway or anything. Okay, yeah. They
Yeah.
are Roxy Hart and Velma Kelly to me.
Yeah, exactly. And so, but each time that I've watched it though, I feel like I've found myself warming up to her performance a lot more. I do understand why people maybe don't like her voice or think she may have been miscast even. I've seen people say that, but I think there's something kind of inherent in her being so out of her element just to begin with that really works for this part on kind of a meta level. Like, she is not Velma Kelly. She is not Catherine Zeta-Jones. She is this aspiring entertainer, and that's kind of the reason she hasn't had her big break. Like, her voice is good, but maybe not all that strong. She's got a bit of like a playing dress up feel at times. And I think just as this woman who's like scheming her way through life and like wanting attention and willing to do whatever it takes to get it, she really, really works. And she's got this like spunky energy that I think is really fun, and sort of, as odd as it sounds, like Julianne, like she's just adapting herself really well to the format here, this very stagey, like broad style that the film has. And yeah, she just complements Catherine's energy, I think, in a way that maybe some of those actresses that I talked about who were in talks to play it may not have fit exactly the right way.
Yeah, maybe it would help if I had seen any of that laundry list of people who've been on Broadway to compare it to, because yeah, I think like it's one of those roles that's so famous and has been played by so many people that it's easy to do the casting game in your head. And like, I think a Marissa Tomei version of this is definitely intriguing. But
Yeah.
like Renee in the early 2000s like had it. Like, she was at the center of all of this, and that kind of like guilelessness of British Jones to start off with this character who was like, she's ruthless from the beginning, but I think that evolution of her and then like her eventual downfall, like she gets you to kind of root against Roxy at a certain point until the very end. And like, that's maybe not something people thought that she could do after being like the girl in Jerry Maguire, and the fact that she was like up to that task. And again, like opposite kind of this innate ruthlessness of Velma Kelly, where like you get the sense she was kind of born that way, and Roxy definitely had to work for it. No, I think we're on the same page that like the contrast between them is so essential to making this movie work.
Yeah. And I do just think she has this great sort of theater kid put on a show type of energy that
Theater kid energy became very controversial at the Oscars later on. It's a really bold of you to vote in favor of theater kids here.
Yeah. But I really do think that her desire to prove that she deserved this part kind of did transfer into Roxy's desperation in a way for the spotlight. Maybe not in a way that she even thought of it intentionally as she was doing it, but I think it really, really works. Even from the beginning, just like seeing, just like starry-eyed looking at Catherine Zeta-Jones and doing all that jazz and imagining herself on that stage. I think she's just in it. Like, you feel this like urge in her that I think is just really fun to just like see where that goes, all that energy.
Yep.
And I like the Funny Honey performance, of course, which is like sort of this sultry Marilyn Monroe type of number. And I think, to your point, like it's not Catherine, it's not Queen Latifah, but I think it helps with the story that she is good but not great, and is sort of like that Sally Bowles type of character. And she's got some fun sort of like Goldie Hawn, dumb blonde type energy, I think, when she like gets to prison. And
well, Goldie Hawn was a famous option for a previous movie version of this, right?
Yes, exactly. But, you know, imagining the same type of energy that she had in like Private Benjamin kind of like transferred to this.
Yeah, like this isn't where I'm supposed to be. This isn't my issued blanket that's really scratchy. Yeah.
Right. And like Mama Morton like escorting her to Murderer's Row, and she's like, "Oh, is that nicer?" Yeah. And like insisting
she's really
she didn't.
Funny. Like comedy is such a huge element of this that it's not that people underestimate that, but like I feel like she nails it in a way that maybe a lot of those other people we're talking about wouldn't have necessarily.
Exactly. Yeah. And I do agree with you that we both reached for the gun number from her, I think, is so stellar.
It's
just
so
like
good.
The puppeteer act, you know, and it's one of my favorite scenes of hers in the film, where she is just in the performance as a puppet and lip syncing to Richard Gere. Yeah. Just like the contortions of her face. I think it's actually like really skillfully done what she does, like with the wide eyes and just her like flailing of her limbs and everything. It's just kind of riveting. And
the cutting between that and the press conference where she is, you know, kind of, again, like kind of growing up. She's trying to be like the nice, innocent version, but she has that like, "Are you kidding?" line where you can kind of see her like, her like bitchy side of it coming out. Also like just like that Christine Baranski's in the middle of that number and that you can still stand out. Like that's tough competition there.
It really is. Ugh, Mary Sunshine. What a great character name.
What a great, definitely the first time I
Yeah.
ever saw Christine Baranski in anything.
Yep, I think so too.
Yeah, I mean,
maybe that or like the Grinch.
oh God, yeah. I know we're not here to talk about Richard Gere, but like I had really kind of forgotten that he had this in Unfaithful in the same year. Like John C. Reilly gets all the credit for being in The Hours and this and Gangs in New York, but Richard Gere is exceptional in both of these movies, in both Unfaithful and Chicago. And like yet again, another supporting actor who just didn't get what he deserved when it came time for the Oscars.
Well, the thing with that is that he wanted to be campaigned and lead.
I know.
So
I know.
That's probably cost himself a nomination.
Do you think that he was right?
Not particularly. I think he, to me, is like the classic like scene stealing supporting player here.
Yeah.
You know, this feels like so much just Roxy's story. I mean, some people have said that, like, is Velma Kelly a co-lead?
Well,
not in this production, I don't think, personally.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. Like, I know that, like, traditionally at the Tonys, like, both characters have been submitted as lead. And, like, I imagine that without that structure, it all being inside Roxy's head, that feels a lot more natural. Like, obviously, Velma is such a huge element of it. Like, the movie ends with the two of them together. But, like, that doesn't feel like fraud to me to put Catherine Zeta-Jones in supporting. No. It's obviously a very smart move. It worked out well.
Yeah. To go back to the Roxy performance when she is daydreaming her little vaudeville show in her silver dress, just the prelude to the song, and it was like doing her tight five there, just like talking about Amos, and he was a zero in the bed department, and like he was operating a carburetor. You know, it's very charming.
Yeah. It really is kind of, you know, Renée Zellweger's not like a star I ever really feel like I fully wrapped my head around. Like, it's not like, I don't think I get what a Renée Zellweger performance is the way I do like a Nicole Kidman or a Julianne Moore performance.
Right.
But I feel like in that moment you are kind of seeing, I mean, maybe that's like what the best parts of Judy are too, when I think about it, like her kind of being up on stage, like connecting with the audience, doing a tight five in the same way. That is her special skill.
Yeah. Which is also odd when you look at like behind the scenes quotes and everything, and everyone on Chicago was like, Renée in the beginning was like extremely shy, and she didn't want to like go and put herself out there. She wanted people to like, you know, she only wanted like the director and everything to be on the set with her during these moments. And then you watch it and you're like, she seems like, you know, this big, bold entertainer.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Maybe she's someone who like was not necessarily the most natural on camera, but made it work anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. But just in that song, I love her delivery and just like the dynamics in her vocals and being like, I'm a star.
Yeah.
The audience loves me.
Yeah. And like, again, it's not like a powerhouse vocal thing, but it's performance. It's comedy. It's like kind of getting who that character really is on a fundamental level. Like, I think it's probably okay that she's the only Roxy either of us has ever seen. Like, it seems like she gets it. Yeah.
So I also just love her moment on the stand when she is literally like there's a meta layer of her giving a performance in this trial of being like, oh, I was just like, you know, we both reached for the gun and I was just some innocent girl who came and, you know, maybe I did cheat on my husband, but like I was tempted by jazz and liquor and all these things. Just you feel just she leans into the comedy of that. And then the fainting moment at the end and just like winking at Richard Gere at the end and being like, what a bullseye, huh?
Yeah, well, like I saw the movie Leatherheads, which I don't really remember all that well, but it felt like that really leaned into that like 30s fast talking broad kind of thing that she's capturing here, and I don't think it worked out all that well, but she definitely had it in her if it had been done properly.
Yeah, I completely agree. And just after that, in the confusion and the sort of discomfort when the press moves on after she's found innocent, and it's like she's so narrowly focused that she is very casually cruel to her husband when there's been this whole thread of like she's claimed that there was a baby that she also had on the way, and just her being like, there's no baby. Yeah. And you see in her eyes like she just has no consideration really for him or really anyone other than herself, because now her dream of the spotlight is seemingly dead, at least for the moment. Yeah, so
you get that she's a good liar, but maybe not necessarily the best strategic thinker.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes. But yeah, her final big finale moment performing with Catherine, I think, is a spectacular note to end on.
It's
Just the
so
two of them.
good. And she's hustling. Like, she really is matching Catherine Zeta-Jones step for step. Like, I think you can see the differences in their physicality there. Like, you get which one of them is the more natural dancer, but like that number really sings. Like, I think, if that number had been less spectacular, I think the movie had already got you by then. It's not like they needed it to close it, to like take it home, but they did anyway.
Yeah, that's kind of a scene where people always said like Academy members were dancing in the aisles watching Chicago. That final moment is just like, you can sort of picture that.
It is a blast. Like that. I mean, I don't know how much you want to talk about the best picture race overall, but like you look at the options that are in there, and you've got like three pretty dour movies and like the middle Lord of the Rings where like it ends and nobody's in a good spot. You're like, everyone wanted to vote for Chicago instead.
Yeah. Yeah, especially given what was happening in the world.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. Nicole Kidman in The Hours. So, Nicole Kidman, our winner here, winning on her second nomination. She's coming off an incredible year where she had Moulin Rouge and The Others in 2001. She's divorced Tom Cruise. She is thriving, and she launches right into filming The Hours, which is an adaptation of the Pulitzer Prize-winning novel by Michael Cunningham about the parallel lives of three women, one being the writer Virginia Woolf. Nicole was the first choice to actually play Virginia, according to Stephen Daldry, the director. And kind of impossible to talk about this performance without mentioning the nose. So she is wearing, yes, she is wearing a prosthetic nose, not only to look more like Virginia, but also because, according to Anne Roth, the costume designer, kind of allowed her to disappear into the role. And so because she was sort of in a fragile state, because this was pretty much like post-divorce, like right away. And it really helped her to get into character and be able to sort of transform in that way. So The Hours, like I said, it's about these three parallel lives. The first is in 1923, where Nicole plays Virginia Woolf as she starts writing her book, Mrs. Dalloway. And she also struggles with crippling depression, and her husband doesn't seem to understand that living in the country is not what she wants, and it's only made things worse. Her sister and her kids visit, but that doesn't particularly go well either. And so Virginia decides to escape to a train station to try to return to London. And meanwhile, we have Laura Brown, Julianne Moore, this housewife in 1951 who is reading Mrs. Dalloway, and she's unhappy with her domestic situation and wants an escape. Then there's Clarissa Vaughn, Meryl Streep, who is in New York City in 2001, and her storyline mirrors the Mrs. Dalloway story as she tries to throw a party for her longtime friend Richard Ed Harris, who's dying of AIDS. So this is another big one. Katie, thoughts on the great Nicole Kidman overall and her Oscar-winning performance here?
How many hours of podcasts have been done by Oscar fanatics who were born in the 80s and 90s about the hours at this point?
Always the hours.
Always the hours. I really do think you can't be an Oscar lover and not love the hours on some level. Like, it is just this essential distillation of, like, not just about the Oscars, but like about what like big, ambitious, but also, I don't want to say middlebrow because it's not that kind of movie, but like a very digestible story that has big ideas behind it with like huge powerhouse actress performances in it. There is no better example of it. The 30 Rock joke, calling it the weeks, looms large. I understand why it does on some level, but this movie is just like treat after treat of performances and score and like parallel storytelling. And like, you know, the first time you see this movie and realize how the 50s and the 2000s story connect to each other, like I think it really should take your breath away. Like it builds on itself so beautifully.
The editing,
incredible. Like it just it's one of those movies that like I've seen so many times and have lived with for so long that it's kind of hard to be like, well, here's how we break it down. Like it just kind of is.
Right.
But
it is and has always existed.
Yeah, basically. I mean, our friend Joe Reed is like the great, the world's great connoisseur of the hours. I feel like I can't really do him justice by talking about it. But for the Nicole Kidman of it, like I think she gets put into Best Actress for a very convenient purpose because Meryl Streep has Adaptation, Julianne Moore has Far From Heaven, Nicole is not competing against herself, so it makes sense to make her lead actress. And like I think someone's done the screen time, and like she has the least screen time of the three of them, but she is she's the storyteller of the movie. Like Virginia Woolf is the person who's writing the story that both of these other women are leaving. She's the one who gets to decide the fate of all the people. I think it makes sense for her as a lead actress. And also like the larger narrative of Nicole Kidman at this point in her career, like she is ascendant in a way that Julianne Moore is not quite yet. And Meryl Streep's in a different phase in her career. Like this is when Nicole Kidman was like destined to win Best Actress in some way. Like I think the Moulin Rouge conversation is interesting and we can probably have it. But, you know, she's just kind of towering in this movie. Like it gets at so many of the essential Nicole Kidman things. Like the disappearing into the nose thing, like I think is less important than just the like diving into thorny arguments with Stephen Delane, who plays her husband, or just with herself in her head and figuring out how the story is going to go. Like Nicole Kidman always feels like this actor who's going to like jump in, do the work, figure things out, kind of like get bloody in the process. And that is who Virginia Woolf is in this movie. And I don't know if it's as elemental a like winning the right Oscar for the right performance. Like I was talking about Barbra Streisand and Funny Girl, but it's really close to it. Like I think it is almost all of the things that she really does best. And they figured out their Oscar jiu-jitsu exactly right to get her the Best Actress for this.
Beautifully said. Yeah, I think I love the hours. Shocker. I think it's such a beautifully put together film. Just the intercutting, like I said, between the storylines, I think is really seamless. And I think it speaks with a lot of empathy towards women who feel very stifled by their circumstances and by these men in their lives who don't seem to understand them. But it's like they're all
or
sort
Alice
of
and
bonded.
Janney, also one woman.
Or Alice and Janney. But also, you know, in Meryl's case with Richard too.
Sure.
You know. But they have those, like, they have that bond through time in a way by these feelings of depression and emptiness. And each of them kind of have different resources and certain freedoms than the other. But, you know, that feeling is still real. And if there was a storyline in 2024, you could still tap into that feeling from a different angle, maybe with some like social media involved. But that root emotion wouldn't be all that different, I think, from what Virginia Woolf was going through like a century ago.
You get
so that's always kind
Clarissa
of been
Vaughn getting a Throwback Thursday picture of her at Wellfleet, and it sends her into a spiral. That's the social media
I seem to be
update.
unraveling. Yes. Just scrolling.
But the source, it's not like you get three stories of like, oh, these women getting men telling them what to do. Like there's so much nuance. Like Virginia Woolf is like, you know, her husband is not really understanding her, but she has like very real mental illness. That's like, she's hearing voices. Like a lot of that is really her being unable to escape her own head. The movie opens with her very famously committing suicide for kind of that reason more than like, hey, my husband's making me unhappy. And like you get darling Chauncey Riley here again as a husband who just wants to be nice to his wife. His wife is not having it. That's the through line with Chicago. And it is like a lot of that stifling domesticity, like in Far From Heaven, but like we said, a different thing. And like, I think Meryl Streep maybe is who kind of sticks out to me more and more as like, it's like her life is kind of the most outwardly perfect of any of the three of them, like in a way that we can understand now. And she doesn't have the same like kind of like suicidal thoughts really. That's kind of like belongs to Richard, but like she's haunted by the past. She's haunted by like what she used to have and what she doesn't have anymore. And it's a really, again, like nuanced take on a sense of loss and like this ineffable wrongness in your life that goes in a different direction than the other two. It's like there's so much richness in it. It makes it one of those movies you can return to over and over. And I think depending on where you are in your life, something different is going to resonate with you.
Yeah, and take away something different from the storylines. Yeah. And I think this is one of Meryl's best performances that she wasn't nominated for an Oscar for.
That's an interesting category because she's been nominated so many times. It's like there's very few things the Oscars
what else
didn't
is
catch.
there? Right.
Mamma Mia.
But right. Yeah, well, that's right up there too. But Julianne Moore is great, but I do think Nicole Kidman is, you know, she really does transform. And yes, the nose is easy to call out as gimmicky or distracting. Maybe it is at first, but it's not like a surface level thing where the transformation is the performance.
People
for
are
me,
so
you know.
weird about noses. I thought of this about Maestro too, and like I get that was
Yeah.
like a whole different brouhaha, and there was like accusations of anti-Semitism, which like I have no standing to talk about, but like I think people get so strange about seeing actors they know transformed, but like don't allow themselves time to get over it. And I'm imagining the same thing happened with Ours that I know happened with Maestro. As most people sat down and watched the movie, they just forget about it. You know, it's not as big a deal once you just see the performance happen, which is the whole point of these things happening. That said, I don't hold it against Denzel Washington saying by a nose. I think that was fine.
Yeah,
some people get mad about
funny.
it, I know.
Yeah, good bet.
Thank you.
But yes, for me, she really does sink into especially the heaviness that Virginia Woolf was feeling, just like the struggle to even muster up the strength to get out of bed in the morning.
Yeah.
But
then
that,
she when she gets out of bed, she's just gonna pick some fights with the staff just to feel alive. I do like that.
Yeah, well, you do what you gotta
Nellie,
do.
get on that train, Nellie. You can do it.
Yeah. But also she has that very like poetic sense of wit to her, and you know, to make these big poetic proclamations feel as natural as possible when they could have been so over the top and so cheesy. But I think she's just very well modulated in the performance. I think her vocal work is very striking to me. You know,
yeah, you've really been hitting everybody's voices here. Like you're watching these on a level that I'm not even seeing.
Yeah, I don't know. Those minor things tend to stick out to me.
Yeah.
But I think, yeah, like when she's writing her like suicide note to Leonard about like hearing voices and she can't stop them, and how he's given her the greatest possible happiness and all this stuff, and just her look of utter deflation as she enters the water, like it's quite a start. Like it really does set a tone
and determination on her face as she's walking out. Like she's walking with so much purpose as she heads toward this thing that she's, that's 1941 or something, and the movie mostly takes place in 1923, so you get a sense of how long this has been with her, which again is echoed in Richard, who you see in the present day, like really in a kind of similar determined headspace.
Yeah But I think she really does nail that feeling of being lost in her own thoughts when she's like even lying in bed or just like looking at her reflection and just
gazing at a dead bird.
Just like staring a little too long at her niece as she's talking with her. And it's just like a little discomforting, but like you can just feel, she just feels things very deeply. You know?
And it's not that I don't think the performances, like she and Julianne Moore, I feel like are playing the most similar characters of like women who are just kind of like stepping out of time of where they are, but it does feel like there's like a more extensive depth to what Virginia Woolf was feeling there. Maybe it's because she's playing like a great writer who's making something out of all these feelings of being disconnected. But I think again it makes that performance emerge more as a lead too. No,
yeah, I agree. And when her sister Miranda Richardson arrives early, I also love her very sardonic comment there where she's like, Leonard thinks it's the end of civilization. People are invited at 4 and arrive at 2:30.
Yeah, she's funny. Again, in the fight with the cook.
She has that poetic.
Yeah. Like you get how all of this great work comes from someone, even though she's like kind of sitting in her house, like chewing on her pens. And there's so many versions of movies about writers that don't get at any of that in like the way that they interact with actual people. Yeah. What is going on with that? It feels like Hollywood just doesn't, ironically, know how to write writers very well. Hard. Writing is a tough thing to dramatize, right? To make cinematic. Yeah. And like maybe it's because like they're not trying to like have Virginia Woolf like come up with all her like best lines in conversation where she's like, running back to scribble it down. But it just like it captures her voice. And I don't know if that's to credit to Michael Cunningham, if it's from the book or it's from David Hare, but it really feels all like of a piece. Yeah. But even when she does have that opening line where she's like, Mrs. Dalloway said she would buy the flowers herself. It's a great opening line. The gravity of that. I know. And just like the sort of hushed sort of confidence there. Yeah. It just works. It, again, could have been very cheesy. Yeah, but it's not easy to read a famous line like that and make it sound like it's something that a real person is just saying. And she totally does that. Right. Yes. I do think we have to talk about the train station sequence.
her big moment.
Yeah.
And she has so many incredible quotes for me that still resonate. I think the way she modulates that scene is fantastic because she's still in this sort of haze of depression in the beginning, but she is reaching her breaking point, and she's trying to make Leonard understand her and how like what he's put her through is not helping.
Yeah.
If anything, it's making her worse.
What are the lines that you
Well, I mean, she says, "You call me ungrateful. My life has been stolen from me." Just the sense of poetry there, I think, again, really masters that. Saying, "I'm dying in this town." That's such a great crescendo moment. And he keeps kind of suggesting how difficult this process of like attending to her has been, and everything he's done is for her own good and all this stuff. But you can see this just like frustration on her face that like, you still don't get it.
Yeah.
And
even in like the beginning of it, when she's kind of being more lightly sarcastic, where he's like, Nellie's making dinner, you gotta meet it. She's like, no, man, no, no such obligation exists. Like she's, again, that wit coming back. And so that the dynamic range of that scene where she can start off as this kind of like annoyed by her husband showing up here to really laying it all out on the table. And then to kind of end at a kind of peaceful detente where she loses, she loses the argument, but she has made herself heard at the same time. So it feels cathartic all the same.
Yeah. Just the line that always gets me is when she says, "I wish for your sake, Leonard, I could be happy in this quietness.
Yeah.
But if it is a choice between Richmond and death, I choose death."
Yeah. Well, and yet again, you get back to Richard in the present day where, Meryl Streep's trying to be like, would people stay alive for each other? And you can just hear him and basically saying back to her, like, I wish for your sake that could be true. All those echoes of this movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's a great screenplay.
It really is.
Another one I wish it could have won adapted screenplay.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there was a bit of an upset there with The Pianist.
Yeah.
One of many upsets for The Pianist.
Yeah, that
at the
was,
end of that Oscar night. But anyway.
A couple years ago, I edited a story for VF kind of about the hours and the Oscar race, and David Hare gave an interview to David Canfield, who wrote the piece, and he was like, yeah, everyone kept telling me I was going to win, and then it didn't happen, and I was pissed for about 2 hours, and the next morning I didn't care anymore. That's like, okay, good for you, David Hare. That's a better attitude to have.
That's healthy. Yeah,
exactly.
And I think that's kind of how I feel sometimes with some Oscar races that I get very intently like invested in. Is just like the next day I'm like, oh well, it's over.
You're like,
I survived.
I'm
okay.
still myself, and I was never going to win this Oscar in the first place. This is fine.
Right. Yeah. One other line I really enjoy is when she's talking with Leonard at the end about how someone has to die in order that the rest of us should value life more. It's contrast, which, by the way, I think is going to be the line that I say whenever people ask why I like depressing movies.
It's contrast.
It's contrast,
That's what we do here is we try to force people to watch movies they don't necessarily want to watch. We're like, it's good for you. It'll make you appreciate everything else.
Exactly. Yes. But I think you hear that line, like this feeling of like self-sacrifice in a way, and a bit of like feeling like a martyr in some ways of like, maybe my purpose that I've been looking for is to just like sacrifice myself for the sake of my peace of mind, my family's peace of mind, and to finally put an end to my suffering.
Yeah.
And I think in her body language, like she's kind of like settled. She's more comfortable now of like, she's got those feelings out of her system and she's kind of resolved herself to like ending her life on her terms as her choice.
Yeah.
And you may not like it or you may not agree with it, obviously, but the point is that she's taking ownership of herself,
Yeah, it's a really powerful way to end that part of the story. And I mean, it ends with her dying, but for the single day that we're watching through, it's a powerful place to end it.
Yes. Well, I think it's time to transfer into the Oscar discussion and discuss why we think Nicole won over this lineup. So, for the precursors, it was quite an interesting race to track because Julianne Moore totally dominated the Critics Awards. So she was an early frontrunner. She won the Los Angeles Film Critics, the National Board of Review, Online Film Critics, Chicago Film Critics, Washington, D.C., Toronto, Independent Spirit Award, just like total domination. But Diane Lane actually won a few herself. She won at the New York Film Critics and the National Society of Film Critics. So But then with the major
those are the ones who get her in there. Sorry, I'm interrupting where you're headed.
Yeah, I think so.
You win the New York Film Critics Circle, and that's how your, unlikely
put her on the map.
happens. Yeah.
Yeah. But Julianne Moore won the Critics' Choice Award. Remember when the Critics' Choice Award actually went to like the true Critics' Choice? Just saying.
I mean, it could happen. It could someday happen again.
Yeah, we'll see. But at the Golden Globes, Nicole won the Drama Actors Award and Renée won the Comedy Musical Award. And Nicole won at BAFTA. Somewhat negligible whether BAFTA had influence at this time, but Renée won at SAG. So it was kind of a dead heat going into the Oscars. Everyone had a little something, except for Salma, unfortunately. But why do we think Nicole Kidman was our winner from this group?
I mean, I think the place that she was in her career, the notion of it being a makeup for Moulin Rouge, I think was pretty powerful. Like, obviously Chicago's really popular. I mean, in my memory, like, Chicago opens around Christmas, so you imagine Chicago surging at this point. Like, if the Oscars had happened 3 weeks later, perhaps Renée Zellweger wins after all. Also, like, the Weinstein publicity campaign is an insane overdrive. Like, as far as I know, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, like, they're pushing Chicago for Best Actress, but like The Hours is like a huge deal for them. It's got Sky Rudin behind it also. Like, they see Nicole Kidman as their ticket, probably more than Renée, because they want to push Catherine Zeta-Jones more. And even though they're in separate categories, they'd be distracting from each other. So you've really got Harvey Weinstein at the peak of his powers to be able to like really choose people's attention. And if you can direct people toward Nicole Kidman and then direct people toward Chicago for what you want them to pay attention to it for, you get both, which is exactly what winds up happening.
Yeah, absolutely. I think she had a lot in her favor. You know, she is in the afterglow of her divorce. She's proving that she's here to stay between Moulin Rouge and even the others, and now The Hours. So she's gaining respect, and she is totally disappearing into this role. And I think there was just a lot of respect for her letting go of vanity and really sort of committing herself to this almost character role in a way.
Yeah.
And I also just think her monologue at the train station is like such a clear, like, you take that out, just watch that as a clip, and it's just like she earns it in that moment in a way.
Because plenty of people watched it just as a clip at that point. Like, I mean, I guess YouTube doesn't exist, so I don't know, like they're finding a way to see it like on Good Morning America or something like that, or just fast forwarding to that. Because for all that we were saying about what Renée is doing in Chicago, there is no real capital A acting like that in Chicago. Like that, The Hours is like really hitting that like fastball right down the middle.
Plus, it is kind of a consolation prize in a way for The Hours. Not that every film gets a consolation prize, as Martin Scorsese has dealt with multiple times now. But, you know, when you compare it to Renée and Chicago, I do think there is so much to focus on with that film. And she isn't always the standout necessarily. I think there could be some who, again, didn't care for her singing and whatnot, the dancing, whatever. You know, there could have been some people distracted with Nicole's nose, and her film wasn't like necessarily universally loved.
Yeah,
so it's not like she didn't have a few things that could have been stumbling blocks, but
it did feel like by the time the Oscars happened, The Hours had lost steam in some ways. You know, like it's not. There, I think there's a lot of directions you can attack it from. That like Chicago, for all its crowd pleasing aspects, was like a little bit harder to tear down. I mean, The Hours is like a women's picture, like not as like literally as far from heaven, but especially at this point in the Oscars, that made it really easy to tear apart.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think Nicole makes a lot of sense as that traditional dramatic winner. You know, we hadn't seen an actress win for a musical since Liza Minnelli for Cabaret, which was 30 years earlier.
Wow. And was the next one Emma Stone?
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, I wouldn't really count like Reese Witherspoon and Walk the Line, or even Marion Cotillard and La Vie en Rose. Those are like dramas with music more than musicals.
Singing and dancing, your way to a Best Actress win. That's not as easy as
harder than you think.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah. But I do really love Nicole's speech when she has this really beautiful line, because we're obviously post 9/11 now, where the war in Iraq is happening like as they speak. So a lot going on in the world and in America at this time. But she said, "Why do you come to the Academy Awards when the world is in such turmoil? Because art is important, and because you believe in what you do and you want to honor that. And it is a tradition that needs to be upheld."
It's a real we come to this place for magic precursor. Who
Right?
who knew what was coming down the pike? I remember being so struck by how emotional she was in that speech, because I think now, like, you get really raw emotion, but a lot of times for the lead actors, like, they've been going through this gauntlet of award shows for so long that, like, all the real emotion has kind of been, like, strained out of them.
Already processed.
Yeah. And, like, and for her, it just feels so on the surface. It's really great to see.
Yeah. Yeah. Because maybe it's partly because it wasn't, like, totally sewn up for her.
Yeah.
But,
and she expressed her joy in an appropriate way and did not manhandle anybody who was not expecting it. So good on you, Nicole. Some other acting winners could learn a lesson from that.
This is very true.
Yeah.
But I do actually fully agree with what she said. And that's why when people, like, sort of grumble about the Oscars every year and how they're not important, it's sort of like, sure, they're not the be all end all, but they are just, like, this celebration of art that a lot of people watch. Like, maybe not as much as there used to be, but I think it is just an important sort of cultural institution, you know, at this time when everyone is so in their own little worlds nowadays. I mean, like, it's one of the only things, at least in the entertainment world, that you can sort of rely on every year that sort of brings people together. So
and they are a reason for movies like The Hours to get made and to be remembered. Like, they are a benchmark for which we can look at what we have done, who we celebrated, why we did it. And then, a project like this podcast shows that it's not just about who won. It's about who got left out, who didn't get nominated. Like, that's just as an important part of the story as the winners themselves. That's why whenever people get too bent out of shape about, like, the wrong person winning, I'm like, yeah, that happens sometimes. But, that they were, like, it's all part of the story.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think it's time to get to some Twitter questions.
Oh my God. You gave me a preview of these. These people are so smart. It's crazy.
I know. Smarter than I am even. Well, actually, I wanted to start with one from Instagram. Oh. This was from Humphrey Fogart, who said, did Kidman win because she was the runner-up the year prior? And did the Academy spend the next 20 years trying to make it up to Julianne Moore?
I feel like Julianne Moore question was a theme in a lot of these, right?
Yes, a lot to talk about there. I don't think she was the runner-up for Moulin Rouge. We talked about that last week. That was probably Sissy Spacek. But I think she was just red hot at the right time for her to win. As for Julianne Moore, I mean, her win was 12 years later. So, but, and I think if the Academy did feel like we have to make it up to Julianne Moore, they probably would have nominated her a little more than they did, like for Kids Are All Right or A Single Man. Like, there were opportunities, and it's only Still Alice after this, so it's hard to say.
Yeah, and, like, Still Alice definitely had that vibe of, like, it is now finally her time, and I think that movie's a lot better than that reputation gives it. Like, it's a really good movie, and it's not a The Blind Side situation where it's just like we finally got one, but. Yeah,
but to what end?
I don't think there was a Julianne was robbed sense after this. Like, she got those 2 nominations. I think being nominated twice makes it harder to win either of them. But it definitely, like, put her in the club in a way that, like, she was absolutely going to get another shot back up there.
Yeah, I think so. Christoph said, I know Denzel saying buy a nose when he read the card was a joke, but I still find it annoying because it implies Nicole Kidman only won because of a prosthetic. Am I too sensitive?
I feel like we already kind of dissed him and said yes earlier, but it's okay. Look, you are entitled to be annoyed by literally anything you want.
Yeah.
When people read acceptance speeches off their phones, I get very mad about it. So you're allowed to hang on to this. I feel like if it had been, like, imagine Adrian Brody, like, presenting, like, a year later, like, if he had done it, I think everyone would have been, like, 10 times angrier. But when you're Denzel Washington, you can kind of get away with anything.
I think it's a cute joke. I was never really bothered by it.
No, I wasn't either.
It is what it is.
Yeah.
There are worse things to be mad at.
When Denzel Washington wins, Julia Roberts is like, I love my life before she...
Yes, like, fully making it about herself.
When you're like, okay, Pelican Brief, I get it. But, like, shut up, Julia.
Yeah. Movie Minds and Music Thoughts said, did Nicole really have the best performance, or was this to make up for her snub the previous year? Well, I'm not going to say if I think it was the best just yet. I will save that for the last segment. But I just think, maybe her previous loss did help her. I saw a lot of columnists at the time saying that part of why Nicole would win is to be, like, making up for her not winning for Moulin Rouge, but I don't think that was like a leading argument for her win necessarily.
Not a leading contributor. But yeah, God, that Moulin Rouge performance is really something.
It's spectacular. Yeah. Hi Girls, Hi Louise said, relitigate our 3 The Hours queens into their rightful categories, please.
Oh, do we feel like they're not in the right I would say they're in the right places, honestly. Like Meryl being, was Meryl campaigned as lead for The Hours and didn't get it?
Yep. Right.
Because then that's entirely because adaptation is out there also. I am with Nicole being in lead and Julianne in supporting. I really feel like Meryl could go either way. Like, I get why they put her in lead for this, but like, I think if adaptation hadn't existed, it would have made more sense for Meryl and Julianne to be supporting and Nicole to be lead. That's my vote.
Wow. I think I'm not really even going to think about the politics behind like how they would be best positioned. I am just going to say no need to make this any more complicated than is. They're all leads. Okay. It's about the 3 of them.
That's a reasonable stance. I'm too cynical about it, just thinking about how campaigns work.
Yeah, I mean, I get it, obviously, from a strategic standpoint, but I think, like, in a vacuum, they all are leads.
So the Oscars haven't nominated 2 women in lead since Thelma and Louise, and you think they can handle 3 lead actresses? I mean...
Well, clearly
Good
not.
luck.
They couldn't even handle putting Meryl into this lineup, so, yeah. Let's see. Christoph said, sorting the Hours ladies into their categories. If Julianne campaigned in supporting because she also had Far From Heaven, and Meryl campaigned in lead because she also had adaptation, why did Nicole campaign in lead despite having the shortest runtime of the 3?
Because she didn't have another one.
Because she looms so large over the film.
She looms large over the film, and she didn't have a reason to bump one way or another. This was her only movie. And so I think if you can go lead, go for it.
And I don't know if this is going to be controversial to people, but I think there is just a little bit more prestige that comes from a lead win than a supporting win.
100%. Yeah. I think if Julianne Moore had won a supporting actress Oscar, it would have been fine, but it should have been a lead. This is how I feel about Anne Hathaway having a supporting actress Oscar. I'm glad she has an Oscar. Yeah. Should be a lead. Same with Viola Davis getting supporting for Fences. You're like, okay, I'm glad she got there, but that's not a proper encapsulation of either of their contributions to Hollywood. And I would like them to get leads.
Very good point. Yes. Well, Joey Gentili has quite a perspective here. Said, The Hours is a clear ensemble that Kidman, like Moore and Streep, all are supporting. If she had been put in the right category, loaded question, where she belonged, would she have won in supporting?
If Kidman had been in supporting?
Yeah.
No. I think Catherine Zeta-Jones wins that kind of in any permutation you're going to figure out.
Yeah.
I
think maybe it would be closer with her and Catherine, but I think Catherine still wins.
I struggle with the like everyone in an ensemble is in supporting argument. Like I think you have to have a lead. Like when Lakeith Stanfield and Daniel Kaluuya both get nominated in supporting for Judas and the Black Messiah, I'm like, this is a logical fallacy. This doesn't make. Yeah. You can't just have 2 supporting actors. I know. It was a weird Oscar year for many reasons. But yes. Yeah. No, I think Catherine Zeta-Jones wins. Don't you?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
And then who knows what happens? Nicole loses The Hours. Who knows what happens for her future Oscar chances?
Oh, that's an interesting.
I think we got a question about that later, so put a pin in that. Darian Dominique Dion said, if Nicole had gone supporting, who would have been her replacement in lead?
Oh.
I think it's just Meryl.
Oh, you think so?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know who else it would be.
I don't have enough of a grasp on the field at this point to figure out who that would be. Because, like, if you look, like, there's not anyone from Gangs of New York or The Pianist or Lord of the Rings who's going to go into the Best Actress category. Right. It's kind of a bro-y Oscar lineup beyond them.
Yeah. I mean, there was like Maggie Gyllenhaal for Secretary was kind of in contention, but that seems like not something the Academy would touch.
Yeah.
Nia Vardalos for My Big
That
Patrick
would
Wedding.
have been so cool. What a great nomination.
How fun would that have been to talk about?
Great nomination. Are you kidding?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think when we talked about the 2002 Oscars on Little Women a while ago, like it is crazy to me that My Big Fat Greek Wedding doesn't win the screenplay award. Like that's such a like classic minting a new star. I mean, God knows I'm not taking away Pedro Almodovar's Oscar there.
No.
But yeah, it was such a classic screenplay winner.
Yeah. Christopher Perkins said, did you know The Hours was adapted into an opera in 2022? Which other female-led ensemble film should get the same treatment?
Oh, not from this year, but just like in general.
Yeah, The Favorite.
I was going to say Far From Heaven could make a great opera. For my limited knowledge of opera, let's be clear. I know that there's an opera about Oppenheimer, not like based on the movie, but like about the person. So Barbie, do Barbie opera.
Oh, I love that.
That's a female-led ensemble movie.
Sure, would love to see it.
Yeah, I gotta watch more of the Gilded Age to learn what opera's all about before I can predict this.
John T said, is The Hours the greatest cast of actresses ever assembled on screen? And if not, what comes close?
It's really hard to argue with. Like when you get like the single scene Toni Collette coming in there, or Miranda Richardson.
Oof, yeah.
Margot Martindale as Mrs. Latch. Like it's really hard to beat.
I know. Yeah. I mean, what else? Like Steel Magnolias maybe would be up there, but that's not fully.
I'd have to think this through longer. I mean, you think about like The Women, which I've never seen, but like, you know, has like the sheer numbers, but do they use them in the way that The Hours does?
What about 9?
But again, do they use...
Not talking about quality of film, but just the actresses themselves.
I don't want to diss Fergie too much, but I do wonder if she's dragging down...
She's maybe best in show.
but is she dragging down the star power average that we're talking about here?
Perhaps.
But no, I think you gotta count how they use them. And I think The Hours in terms of like powerhouse lead performances and then like character actresses just like swooping in and nailing it. That's hard to beat.
David Pusak said, if Nicole didn't win here, would she then have been nominated for Cold Mountain the following year, and would she likely have won?
Ooh. Probably yes to getting nominated for Cold Mountain, right?
Yeah, I don't know if she would win for that, but because I don't think anyone was beating Charlize that year.
No, but like that, you can imagine her, like Sarah, like Samantha Morton, could she have been like really, or like even, I guess 21 Grams was kind of popular with the Oscars. There's not a lot of like hugely well-loved movies in that lineup. Right. So, yeah, like you got Renee winning that year. Like, yeah, that seems obvious. I don't know. I think you're right that she probably wouldn't have won. Yeah.
Homo Suspiria said, Nicole's win here marks her last nomination until Rabbit Hole. For what other films could or should she have been nominated between that time in either lead or supporting?
Okay, let me go to the Wikipedia. Do you have an answer pulled up for this already?
Yes, Birth.
Oh, yeah. But like, would she? Well, I guess if anyone had known that like Jonathan Glazer would become like, you know, the great viral breakout star of the Oscars a while later, maybe they would have figured it out. Okay. I'm looking. So until 2010 is Rabbit Hole. I thought she was, I mean, I would have to rewatch Margot at the Wedding to see if I would stand by this, but I thought she was great in Margot at the Wedding. That, much like Birth or Fur or some of the other movies she's making at this point. Like no sane person was like choosing to sit down with those movies. But that might be I do love Australia. I would not nominate her for that, but just shout out to Australia. It's in the mix there.
Okay. Marcel said, which makeup job was more convincing for you? Nicole's nose or Salma's monobrow?
Both. I thought they were both so great.
Yeah. Like, I think they're both fine.
That's a really
they're not distracting.
That's a really important unibrow to get right. And I thought they did a great, and like in some like close-ups, I don't know what the secrets are for the hair, but I guess maybe I'm just an easy mark for fake noses. Like I think they all tend to look fine. So I thought it looked great.
Yeah. Christoph said, is there a more extreme case of I'm glad you are an Oscar nominee and I'm so sorry the nomination is attached to such an awful experience than Salma Hayek?
Boy, I mean, that would be a really depressing Wikipedia deep dive to go down. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna say yes, but I bet there are other close to as bad ones.
I mean, I also thought of Ana de Armas for Blonde. Not that, like, maybe the experience was like what Salma went through necessarily, but I imagine it wasn't a walk in the park either.
I do think a lot of us like felt like that nominations for being like, boy, you really went through it. We're feeling for you.
Right.
I'm trying to think of people who like Frances McDormand and Chloe Zhao really seem to be feuding on Nomadland, but I don't think that I don't think it's quite the same.
Right. Sean Kelly said, if you could nominate Salma for another role, what would you?
Ooh. That's, as we were saying, like her filmography is maybe not what it should be.
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you have an answer for this?
I would say Beatrice at Dinner.
Oh, and I've never seen that one. And I know that like all smart people are like, if you liked The White Lotus, you are an idiot for not seeing Beatrice at Dinner.
It does definitely feel like a precursor to The White Lotus, including the fact that it has Connie Britton in it. Yeah, I think that would be the one where it feels like she was really given a chance to do like a real character work there. Yeah. Which she doesn't often get.
Yeah. I mean, maybe it's still coming. Oh, you know what she's great at? I would not nominate her for this. She's really great in Eternals. Speaking of Chloe Zhao, I didn't realize I was going to do that.
Yeah.
Like she shows up and you're like, oh, okay, we're doing something here. And that movie's a mess for all kinds of reasons. But yeah, she's great in it.
Yeah. Also, like, if she had like a few more scenes in House of Gucci, I think she could have been like more of a contender. I'm just going to throw that out there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Lila said, if Nicole Kidman hadn't been here, Salma Hayek would have been the only nominee playing a real person. Do you think this could have boosted her chances? And supposing she ended up actually winning, do you believe she would have gotten better roles from then on?
I don't know if it would have boosted her chances. I do think if she had won, I mean, I don't know. Again, you've got like the Weinstein like roadblock in the way, so it's really hard to imagine yourself out of it. But yeah, surely winning would have helped her there.
I would like to think so. I mean, I feel like we just talked about last week Halle Berry's trajectory after her Oscar, that like with non-white actresses, I feel like Hollywood is just makes it difficult no matter what. So I would like to say that it could have really positively affected her career, but yeah, I don't think her being the only one playing a real person would have necessarily helped if Nicole wasn't there.
Yeah, I mean, this was a very playing a real person friendly period for the Oscars.
It certainly was. The whole decade is really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But no, I agree with you.
Yeah. Sean Kelly said, how do you think Diane Lane managed to get a nomination for an erotic thriller, a genre that the Academy doesn't typically go for, with okay reviews and okay box office? Well, I mean, she herself had strong reviews, so that helps. And she had a really strong campaign, too.
Yeah,
from what I read.
It's that New York Film Critics Circle win, right? Like, they really managed to go into overdrive and promote it for her. And you have to imagine, like, she's been working for a long time. Like, she's kind of a Hollywood kid. There's a lot of affection for her in there. You know, maybe it's like a less obviously visible version of the To Leslie thing, where it's like, oh, the people who know her like are putting the word out there and there's a lot of affection for it. It's a performance that if you see it, you really get it. You can imagine the like Hollywood Whisper Network going into action there.
Yeah. Jamie said, both Diane and Salma received their sole nominations this year. Do you think either came close on another occasion? Is there another role you think was deserving of some Oscar love for either of them?
It's tough.
I don't think Salma really came close anytime after this.
No.
Probably. Diane.
What of Secretariat? Do we feel like Secretariat was really
wow.
getting
maybe very early on in that whatever race that was. Under the Tuscan Sun, she got a Golden Globe nomination for.
Good for her. I'm glad that happened.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if she was like in serious contention for that, but that's something. But also, I do think A Walk on the Moon, she was kind of in the conversation for before Unfaithful. So
she could definitely get an Emmy nomination for Feud.
She could.
Can we count those?
Yeah, sort of. Greg Cramian said, should Diane Lane's scene in the train be required viewing for every acting student? In my opinion, that scene is an amazing demonstration of what acting is about. If the ending had been stronger, would she have won?
Ooh, the ending. Oh, I think the ending's so good. I mean, I guess like the whole back half of the movie is like less good than the front half, but I like the note it ends on. But no, I agree.
Yeah.
Show the train scene to everybody. I don't know how you do that.
Yeah.
I'm glad I'm not an acting student. I couldn't figure out how to recreate that.
Right. It's a tour de force.
Yeah.
Yeah. Joey Gentili said, Diane Lane was a woman robbed. With that said, this type of nomination in a sexual thriller seems to be the last of its kind. Will we see another nomination like this again?
The last of its kind. I mean, I think it has to be, right? I was going to try to fact check that, but like, wait, hang on. Let me just throw out Kate Winslet in Little Children. Sort of.
Sort of, yeah.
She's very naked in that movie and having sex with Patrick Wilson.
Yeah.
I feel like there's something there. I would like to think that we can revert back to erotic thrillers at some point. Like if rom-coms can come back, then maybe they can too. But it will certainly be a while.
Yeah. People don't make sexy thrillers anymore. You know, never say never, obviously, but I have my doubts.
The other one I would throw would be Rosamund Pike and Gone Girl. As I scroll through Wikipedia, that seems like another sort of corollary. Yeah,
I don't know if that's like fully erotic necessarily at times. More like just thriller.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess same with L.
Sort of. Right. Yeah.
Maybe I say if it happens again in the next 10 years, it will be someone in a foreign film. That's my bet. Like, give it
that makes sense.
Anatomy of a Fall with some sex in it. That could happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Good bet. Yeah. Celluloid Siren said, Diane Lane is fantastic and Unfaithful and elevates the movie from merely being a sleazy, soapy thriller. What are some of your favorite erotic thriller performances by actresses that deserve to be nominated but didn't?
Oh, boy. I listened to all of Karina Longworth's erotic 80s and 90s and have still never seen the vast majority of those movies. Kathleen Turner in Body Heat is like the first, like that's what I have seen. She's amazing. I mean, that was like almost literally her first movie. So you get why that nomination didn't happen. But yeah, sure. Throw a nomination for that one too.
Sharon Stone in Basic Instinct is the ultimate.
Yeah.
Linda Fiorentino for The Last Seduction, even though she wasn't eligible.
Oh yeah. Infamously, right?
Yeah. I don't know if you count like Isabella Rossellini in Blue Velvet. If that's like erotic thriller, that's not particularly erotic.
That's a good pick,
I don't
though.
think. But I also thought of Jennifer Tilly and Gina Gershon in Bound.
Oh, fun.
As well.
That's a great pick.
Yeah. Also from a few years ago, Tang Wei in Decision to Leave.
Yeah. Or Less Caution.
Or Less Caution. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Christoph said, rank Richard Gere's Oscar-nominated co-stars from romantic/erotic films.
Oh boy.
Deborah Winger, Julia Roberts, Diane Lane.
I've never seen An Officer and a Gentleman.
I would rank that number 3 of those.
Okay.
So
yeah, I think Julia Roberts is hard not to put at number 1, right? Like that.
She's number
that's
1.
Just such a iconic, truly iconic performance. That it makes sense she didn't win for. And like the arc of her getting to that win is so perfect that you don't want to change it. But yeah, and then so I guess I will take your word for it that Deborah Winger is 3 and put Diane Lane at number 2.
Yeah. Cowboy Bruno said, did Julianne Moore's double nominations hurt her chances of winning Best Actress?
Yeah, for sure, right?
Yeah, sort of. Like, I just don't know if it factored in to, like, it was always going to be Nicole versus Renee, kind of.
Yeah.
So I sort of think it just wouldn't have happened for her even if she didn't have the hours.
Yeah, also being in, like, a Todd Haynes movie that maybe not everybody got.
Right.
Doesn't help.
Yeah. Jack Mahane said, is it possible Moore was a much closer third place than many realize? We know who the runner-up was, but from everything I've read and been told from those who experienced that Oscar season, it seems like Moore had a lot of support that year, similar to Sandra Hüller being a closer third.
I would bet on Salma Hayek as the third. Given that Frida gets 6 nominations and wins 2, like I think it's more popular than Far From Heaven. Like I think they're both kind of sitting at like the like outsider cool kids table.
Yeah.
But if my dream ever comes true and they ever release the vote tallies, which I just like to think someday in my lifetime,
shared dream,
we can at least see the ones from like the 30s. Like everyone's dead. Let us see them.
Yes, thank you.
And so someone in the future will get to see these tallies, and I would say Salma Hayek for third.
Yeah, That makes sense. I mean, I think Julianne definitely had a pocket of support within the Academy
For sure.
who are more aligned with like critic taste than the rest of the Academy. But yeah, you could see by the very cold reception to Far From Heaven that they did not love it on the whole.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Jamie said, in a world where Julianne triumphs this year in either category, does she still sweep the season for Still Alice?
I think no. I mean, Still Alice was like not. It was such a like a. Did it get picked up at Toronto for distribution? Like I know I saw it there, but it was just such a small scale thing that year, and I think it was entirely driven on the engine of like, hey, we can get Julianne Moore an Oscar for this. I don't know who I think wins instead in 2014. I'm curious if you have a pick here.
Well, that is actually the next question, so
Okay.
that leads in perfectly. Yeah, from Amar, who would have won Best Actress in 2014 if Moore actually triumphed here? I have no idea.
I know. It's a weird year.
Did they even nominate her if she had already won? I don't even know. You know, people might say Rosamund Pike, but like the Academy really didn't like Gone Girl, so I have my doubts.
I really think that like Still Alice like may or may not like it might like go straight to Netflix. Maybe not at that point it wouldn't go straight to Netflix, but like close to it.
Yeah.
Is it a weird like Felicity Jones wins? Like
Maybe. I thought of that too.
That would be bizarre. But like looking, there's just not a lot. It's a really dude heavy Oscar year.
Very much
but
so.
Like imagining Reese with like Wild was pretty popular, and Reese Witherspoon is really pop. I don't know. That's a tough one. I might just say Reese. But it also feels like you take Julianne out of there and like something else happens. Like there's some contender who faded.
Jennifer Aniston for Cake.
Oh my God. Jennifer Aniston would 100% have been nominated if Julianne Moore had won an Oscar in 2002. Like I will bet on that revisionist history.
Sliding doors.
I know. think of what you did, Academy. You kept Jennifer Aniston from getting that nomination.
Matt Neglia said, do you believe everything worked out as it was supposed to with Kidman winning for this and Moore winning later for Still Alice, or is there some swapping around you would have done to fit your preferences?
No, I think keeping it this way is the way it should be. As we were like, just like we can't settle on someone in 2014 we wish had it instead. I would rather Nicole Kidman have had an Oscar for Moulin Rouge in a vacuum, but not enough to like swap anything around there. So yeah, I do think it kind of like was meant to be this way.
Yeah, I'm fine with how things shook out. Maybe it's not ideal that Julianne won for Still Alice. I wish maybe she even won for like a Boogie Nights in 97. Sure. That could have been interesting, you know? So, yeah.
Taking away Helen Hunt's Oscar now? I guess maybe she would have been supporting.
No, supporting. Nights. So she would take away Kim Basinger's Oscar, which is fine by me.
I guess so.
Jamie said, Julianne's double nominations this year are her last until the Still Alice win. Are there any roles she should have been nominated for in the 10 plus years between?
You name checked a couple of them. I mean, kids are all right. That's the big one. Because Ruffalo and Annette Bening both get nominations for that, right?
Yep.
I don't know. I don't feel super strongly about her performance in Children of Men, but I loved that movie, and it got like so disrespected by everyone when it came out that give her a supporting nomination for Children of Men and get that movie some more attention.
Oh, obviously, in the years since Still Alice, I would also, of course, throw in May December for something more recent.
Is there anything else?
I loved Gloria Bell. Yeah, but I don't know if I would have nominated her for it.
People do love Gloria Bell. I have not seen that one. I'm not nominating her for the Hunger Games movies. Sorry.
Yeah, Julianne. Fair. Gabriel said, which of the Todd Haynes girlies would you like to switch roles? For me, it would be exciting to see Julianne Moore play Carol Aird from Carol and Cate Blanchett play Carol White from Safe.
Yeah. Oh,
interesting.
God. Well, when you start getting I'm Not There in there, although I guess Cate Blanchett's really the only like major female role, so it's less confusing.
Yeah.
I was thinking about Natalie Portman, who I would love to see in Far From Heaven. Like that, I would watch. I love that.
Yes.
Or like keep Julianne in Far From Heaven and put Natalie Portman in the Patricia Clarkson role. Could also be fun.
That's cool.
But yeah, I feel like she really nailed the Todd Haynes tone. So
Very
I
much
really
so.
hope they work together again.
Yeah. I thought of his miniseries Mildred Pierce, and that Julianne Moore could fit into that very nicely.
Would you put Kate Winslet in May December or something?
That would be really fun to see. Yeah,
she could do
I would really enjoy that.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Jeremy Kaplan said, which 1950s Best Actress nominee would you most like to transport to 2002 so she could take on the role of Kathy in Far From Heaven?
All right, you're going to know these better than me as I scroll through Wikipedia, so you start.
Well, Jane Wyman is the direct one-to-one as the
Sure.
Douglas Sirk, muse. But I would also suggest Deborah Carr. I think she could really adapt herself well to that style.
Yeah, and A Fair to Remember is really not so far off of this.
Yeah.
I mean, trying to put Judy Garland into Far From Heaven, that like breaks the movie. It doesn't make any sense.
Oh my God.
I would watch it anyway. What about Joanne Woodward?
Yeah, I mean, she could very much play like that repressed housewife.
Yeah.
That's like her specialty.
Yeah, she could do that in her sleep. You're saying that's the boring choice, is to put her in there.
No, I would still love to see it.
Yeah.
A bunch of Renée questions, of course. Greg Cramian said, if Renée won this year, does she still win for Judy?
Oh. I guess we didn't ask if she still wins for Cold Mountain. Is this the assumption that she doesn't win for Cold Mountain?
I think that's contingent on if she still wins for Cold Mountain, and she already has 2 Oscars. I don't know.
I lived through it and still don't really understand why she won for Judy. Like, we all just kind of watched that train.
It just happened.
It just
Yeah,
happened.
I know.
Like, it just never stopped.
And she swept.
Yeah, it was crazy. It was like a precursor to the COVID weirdness. Like, we didn't know it at the time, but just weird things were happening there.
Right.
I think maybe she does win for Judy. Like, that was just so no one, because she had gone through such an arc. Like, maybe if she had won for Chicago, then she doesn't have like a weird career dip, and then she doesn't win for Judy. But yeah, I think that was just gonna happen as a Renée comeback, no matter what.
I am gonna say she doesn't win for Cold Mountain if she wins for Chicago. I agree.
I agree with
to
that.
start with.
Yes.
And then I think if Judy comes along and nothing else has changed, she wins for Judy. So she has 2 Best Actress Oscars. That would be my assumption.
Yeah, I think so too. Again, this is another opportunity to give Saoirse Ronan an Oscar when someone who has 2 wins instead. But
I know.
Didn't work out that way.
Yeah. Another one from Greg Cramian. Rob Marshall wanted Toni Collette to play Roxy, but Harvey Weinstein wanted Renée. If Toni had played the part, do you think she would have gotten nominated?
Yeah. I think anyone in that role gets nominated. Not anyone.
Pretty much.
But,
as long as they don't embarrass themselves.
Yeah. I mean, Toni Collette would have been great. Like,
oh, yeah.
Different. And also, I don't want to lose her. I guess she could have also been in The Hours because John C. Reilly was. I don't want to lose her from that one scene. But yeah, I think she still gets nominated.
Yeah. I assume she would be great.
Of course.
Part of me does feel like, does it even, like, as a movie, get that kind of push and have the box office appeal with Toni compared to Renée?
That is probably what Harvey Weinstein argued as well.
Yeah, well, I don't love being compared to Harvey Weinstein, but let's move on. Matt Mazer said Chicago was supposed to get made with so many other actresses like Madonna, Goldie Hawn, Charlize Theron, Liza Minnelli, etc. Would these ladies have scored nominations? I'm going to say yes, just as a blanket statement for all of them.
It always depends on the year that they're competing in. But I think any star who has like Oscar bona fides coming up at that point gets nominated.
Yeah, even Madonna, who famously has struggled with that.
Yes.
Yes. Miles McHale said if Bob Fosse had lived to film his original Velma and Roxy, Madonna and Goldie Hawn, respectively, would Goldie have gotten a nomination? Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah,
no question.
Could have won.
Yeah. Well, this is a fun one from Andrew Carden, who said, cast the role of Roxy Hart with Best Actress nominees from the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. Okay.
You go first.
This one for me, this came together surprisingly quickly for me as I was scrolling. So here's mine. Irene Dunne from the 30s. Jean Arthur from the 40s, Judy Holliday from the 50s,
Yeah.
Shirley MacLaine from the 60s, Liza Minnelli from the 70s,
Obviously.
and Melanie Griffith from the 80s.
Ooh, I like that one.
Yeah. And Melanie Griffith, by the way, did actually play Roxy Hart eventually
of course she did.
on a stage.
Like on a long enough timeline. Everyone does.
It's true.
I'm not going to compete with that. What about?
Okay.
I'll just throw up Michelle Pfeiffer. What if she did it? From the 80s.
Oh my God.
That'd be good, right?
I mean, that would be incredible, actually. Yeah. I mean, I could even see her as Velma Kelly, honestly.
Dual role. They can't do that.
Jeffrey Kerr said Richard Gere had prominent roles in 2 of the films nominated for Best Actress this year, yet that visibility didn't translate to a Best Actor nom for Chicago. What gives?
It's the Best Actor thing, right? It's a category, completely self-inflicted category confusion, I guess.
A little bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was a reputation thing or what it was. Maybe people thought he wasn't strong enough to be a lead for Chicago.
Yeah.
But again, definitely would have gotten nominated in supporting, I think.
Yeah.
So.
He's one of those people who it's like, don't you have enough already? Like, you're rich and famous and good looking. And like, do we need to give this to you? And like now, I think with some more distance from his like really peak of stardom, it's a lot easier to see how much he's giving in both of those movies.
Mr. Gold said, would Catherine Zeta-Jones have won Best Actress if she campaigned in this category, and who could she have replaced?
Yeah, she probably...
No.
You don't think she could have won in Best Actress?
No, I don't personally think so. But what do you think?
I kind of think she could have. I mean, it just kind of changes everything around, right? And like maybe I'm imagining a different version of the movie. But like... I think she and Renee, I think she could have been promoted over Renee if somehow they had both gotten nominated.
Probably true.
So that they wouldn't split votes.
Yeah.
And she would replace Diane Lane, right?
I was going to say Salma Hayek.
Oh, that'd be a bummer.
Yeah.
But probably right.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, Cody Derricks and Christoph both want to know, because some awards notably nominated Catherine in lead, what happens in either category if Oscar voters did put her in lead as well. So we already kind of talked about lead, but what would have happened if Catherine is no longer in supporting? Who wins supporting?
God, that's a really tough question. Does Meryl win?
I might think it might be Meryl.
Yeah. I mean,
she won the Globe.
Chris Cooper wins, so you see how popular that movie is. Like, she hasn't won at that point in quite a while. This is like really kind of the beginning of her ascendance in the 2000s to being so beloved. It would have like kickstarted a little bit sooner. Yeah, I think it's Meryl. I would have been fine with that win, honestly.
I would be happy with that as her third win compared to the Iron Lady.
Oh, sure. Yeah. If we're doing that kind of horse trading.
Yes. Well, the ghost of Glenda Miss Jackson, if you nasty, said, can you rank all the girlies nominated on a scale of how much razzle-dazzle they served?
In the movie or in life?
In these performances, I assume.
Okay.
I mean, Renee would be number one by default.
Renee certainly gets the most razzle-dazzle. I guess Salma's 2.
Yeah, she's got some dazzle.
She's got some verve.
Yeah. Diane, maybe? Third?
Yeah, I think, yeah. And then I think it has to be Julianne for the outfits.
Yeah.
And then, I think Virginia Woolf is the least razzle-dazzle.
Virginia Woolf does not have razzle-dazzle. I hate to break it to you.
so sorry.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. Jimmy said, I can take this one. Recast the 75th Best Actress nominees in the roles of the 50th Best Actress nominees.
Hang on. I'm scrolling. I'm going to see who was nominated at the 50th. Okay. Oh, this is Annie Hall. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's tricky because, I don't know. None of these feel particularly right for some of these roles, but I guess just the personality quirks of Renee could work for Annie Hall.
Yeah.
But that is like so written for Diane Keaton that it's just like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Salma got some Goodbye Girl qualities, perhaps could work. Would be interesting to see her in something like that. Something screwball-y.
Yeah.
Maybe.
She could
I don't know.
That. I've never seen The Goodbye Girl. I'm going off of of this lineup. I have only seen Annie Hall. So I have nothing
that's true.
to. I tried.
Most people, to be fair.
Well, I did this at Oscar Buzz and talked about New York, New York. So it was this year's Oscars, and so I tried to see if I could watch The Turning Point or Julia, and they are completely unavailable on any digital.
Not
platform.
available to stream.
Yep.
Which is interesting.
Yeah.
I would do Nicole for Julia. I think she makes a lot of sense for that. And then who else am I left with? Diane Lane and Julianne Moore. They can do The Turning Point.
Sure. I would watch that.
Have a ball.
Yeah.
Yeah. Joan Waters said, "This is another roster of roles that I'm curious who you would cast if these films were remade today."
Okay, this one I actually did think about because I was very intrigued by this. Okay.
Yeah.
So Unfaithful, I was thinking about like actresses like in their 30s and 40s who my mind immediately went to Anne Hathaway, which I think is kind of obvious because she has the idea of you, and I feel like you need a Diane Lane who like has had some opportunities but maybe not as many as she should have. And I landed on America Ferrera. I think she could do a like good girl living her life the way she's supposed to, kind of breaks bad. I feel like, and there's like there's nuance to it. There's some comedy aspects to it. I would watch that movie.
Wow. I would too.
You can't recast Frida. I don't think that movie exists without Salma Hayek. She could still do it. Like Frida Kahlo lived for a while. Like she could still just play that role.
Frida too.
I went back and forth on Chicago for a while because again, like those are roles that like basically anybody can play. I was like for a while I was like Lady Gaga has to be Velma Kelly, and then I kind of like figured like because I'm doing a lot of like not like who's the obvious one, but like who can get a boost by being in these imaginary movies in my head. So I went back to Saoirse Ronan, who I keep talking about. Cast her as Roxy, and then do Disney kid Selena Gomez as Velma. I feel like she could do it.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, I'm here with the hot takes.
I love it.
Far From Heaven, I think Florence Pugh gets a chance to redo Don't Worry Darling and make it better and do that.
I thought of her too. Yeah.
Although I was also going to throw out Juno Temple, who is in a like an interesting ascendant place after Ted Lasso and now Fargo, and I feel like could do something interesting there. And then The Hours, I really wanted to like go full and like recast all of The Hours because it's such a fun project, but it's really hard. But for the Virginia Woolf part, I was trying to think of like an actress who's like high profile enough, possibly like to a famous marriage, like, but hasn't necessarily like reached the Oscar peaks yet and has like an imperiousness and like a scariness to it. And I think Emily Blunt is who you would do this with. And it could be really good. If she divorced John Krasinski and then that was part of the narrative, that would be better, but not essential to making that work.
Not essential.
I also like, I feel like Zendaya should be in one of these, and maybe you have come up with the place for her. I couldn't really like, honestly, like Virginia Woolf is what made the most sense for her, but like that doesn't make any sense.
That would be quite an interpretation.
I mean, Zendaya and Selena Gomez in Chicago would also be pretty good. But yeah, she seems like if any of these get made today, she's at the top of the wish list for whatever one they are. So take your pick.
And Anya Taylor-Joy.
Yes,
you know.
Exactly. I couldn't come up with a good place for her either.
Yeah. Well, I agree that Frida shouldn't probably be made again, but I went with Melissa Barrera as a possibility for that. Seems like she would be in the mix at least. For Unfaithful, I truly feel like it could be like almost anyone.
They just should remake it. Like just do this.
Yeah. Or just a variation on it. So I just looked at recent Best Actress nominees just to see would any of these be good in a role like this. Somehow I landed on Andra Day.
Ooh, that would be good.
Yeah.
She could also be in Chicago when you think about it. She's got singing talent.
Very much so. Yeah. For Far From Heaven, I went with Amy Adams.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Kind of standard, but I just think
we need that for her.
She needs a role like that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. For Chicago, this is another very standard one, but while I was watching this again, I kind of couldn't get this out of my mind. Emma Stone.
Yeah. I mean, I kept circling back to Emma Stone for all of these because she is at this point the person who can do anything. Yeah.
Maybe put Rachel Weisz as Velma Kelly.
God, she would be great. Could she sing or dance? I have no idea. But
I don't know. Probably.
Do it anyway.
She could do anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. For The Hours, I love that Emily Blunt mention. I think that makes a lot of sense. I went with someone less high profile and British because I think that is helpful. Not essential, but Rebecca Hall.
Oh, yeah. She'd be really great.
Yeah.
put Rebecca Hall in The Hour. I mean, God, again, I'm going to call Joe Reed and be like, okay, recast The Hours today. Like, go.
He just like pulls out his list.
Basically. Rebecca Hall's in there somewhere for sure.
Yeah. That was fun. Chelsea said, obligatory Survivor questions. We always have Survivor questions now. Who wins? Who dominates challenges? Best social game? Best strategy? Who would you want on your tribe? So again, this is as these characters.
As the characters, okay.
Yeah. I don't know if you're a Survivor person.
I'm like familiar enough with the concept.
Yeah.
Because you want someone on your tribe who's like kind of a ruthless game player but has practical skills, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And good social ability.
Because do you want Roxy Hart on your tribe or not? I guess that's the real question.
I think she plays pretty dirty.
Yeah. So do you want her on your team or no?
I mean, to vote her out.
Okay. All right. So this is the strategy that I can't wrap my head around. So she can be there as like the screen to protect you because everyone's mad at her.
Yes. Yes, very much so.
Yeah.
And I think she performs well at challenges too. So I think she'd be a threat.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think Virginia Woolf does well in a Survivor situation.
She's out. She has no interest in helping any of you people survive or herself.
I think she's probably a bummer around camp as well. So, I mean, I don't know if like Frida Kahlo even passes the medical test, to be quite honest. Like, I don't know if she's even out on the island.
The physical challenges are going to be tough. That's true.
Yeah. I mean, Connie, I think she could be a good ally, I think.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
She's good at lying. Like, that's got to be useful.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, but she still has a bit of, like, a guilty conscience, so I feel like I could read her if she was, like, too deceptive towards me.
Yep.
I think Kathy Whitaker would struggle with the emotions of the game. I don't think she's built for this either.
No. I think she's, like, a little too naive about how it's all going to pan out.
Yeah. So, in terms of a winner, I would say between Roxy Hart and Connie.
I'm going to put it to Connie, I think. Don't you feel like most of my knowledge of Survivor comes from watching The Traitors, and I'm seeing Roxy as a real Parvati, where everyone's like, oh, of course you're going to be trying to betray everybody, and then eventually gets kicked out for it.
That's probably fair. Yes, we kind of already answered this, but watching at home said, if Kidman goes supporting, would Streep get the nomination for lead? Yes.
Yep.
I think so. Quite a few Meryl questions. Declan Cashin, what happened with Meryl? I seem to remember her being critical of the Oscars process that year, which might have hurt her despite the supporting nom. I don't really remember that.
I have no knowledge of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was just maybe more of a passion to get Salma nominated and to get Diane nominated, who I assume they were maybe 4th and 5th in terms of nominations. And they knew they were nominating Meryl in supporting already. Yeah. But I do think she probably came close.
Yeah, was also part of like maybe not everyone loves the Hours as much as they thought they would.
Right. Juan Carlos Ohano, how close do you think Streep was for The Hours? Globe nom and perennial nominee and Best Picture nom. Also a rare Best Picture nominee starring Meryl, which is true. Yeah, she surprisingly hasn't been in a lot of Best Picture nominations.
Yeah. I mean, that's the women's bias, right? That movies about women are not worthy of Best Picture.
Corey Zimmerman, Streep was erroneously submitted for SAG consideration in lead for the adaptation, thus competing against herself in The Hours and yielding no nomination for either. If the mistake hadn't been made and she got in SAG and then at the Oscars for lead in The Hours, does Kidman still win? Yeah.
Yeah, I can't wrap my head around any. So it was like erroneously, like just like genuinely a mistake. Is that what happened there?
I think so.
Weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just think that like Kidman is the narrative and is the dominant force in this movie. And
I think all the support would have consolidated around Nicole.
Totally.
Okay, final question from Joey Gentili. Recast these 2000s Oscar talents and Karen Black in these roles. So Karen Black, Anna Kendrick, Juliette Binoche, Penelope Cruz, and Adriana Barraza.
Okay. I'm gonna let you take the lead on
Quite a selection we've chosen here. I would say Anna Kendrick makes sense for Chicago.
Oh yeah, well yeah, her whole part in camp is very ruthless Roxy Hart, right?
Yeah, so makes sense. I would put Juliette Binoche in The Hours.
Yeah.
Or Unfaithful.
Yeah, but if you put Juliette Binoche in Unfaithful, I feel like the jig is up from the beginning. You just gonna go have an affair with that hot guy.
Yeah, that's fair. Penelope Cruz for Unfaithful.
That could be really good. But like, I'm trying to think if there's another place that I would put her in this lineup.
Adriana Barraza, I feel like, is sort of pigeonholed into Frida, unfortunately.
A version Penelope Cruz in Far From Heaven would be interesting. Almodovar to Todd Haynes, like that's a path that makes sense.
Oh yeah. And then Karen Black in Far From Heaven. I don't know. It's I don't know where Karen Black would fit into any of these personally, but
that's the magic.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get to our final segment where we will reveal who we think was the runner-up of this Best Actress race. Katey, I think this is pretty obvious, but who do you think was our runner-up to Nicole?
I mean, I do feel like we've spoiled it for the last 2.5 hours that it's Renée Zellweger. Is it hard sometimes to figure out who the runner-up is?
Yes. Okay. Very much so.
All right. Yeah, that's true.
But I guess
like next year when you're looking at Charlize, you're gonna struggle.
Yeah, because it's when someone sweeps, it's sometimes like honestly when we get to that Renee year for lead in 2019,
I know
who in God's name is the runner-up to Renée Zellweger.
Not a clue.
No, it could be any of them. Yeah. But yes, I think Renee was very much the runner-up of this year. I think that fact probably helped her greatly to win for the next year for Cold Mountain. She was in the Best Picture winner. She had a lot of support behind her. She won at SAG, so she had support from actors. It's just Nicole had a slightly stronger narrative and a more sort of traditional dramatic performance. But I bet it was maybe close. I think it could have been. There's
this domino effect where you get like Nicole doesn't win, so she wins the next year. And then Renee doesn't win, so she wins the next year. And then Charlize wins, then they get nominated for North Country the next year. Like, when does this run out? Because it really did so many things just building on each other in this period.
Yeah, it's just this decade is weird with that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. But my final question for you, I'm very curious to know your response to this. Who would you have voted for from this lineup?
I should have prepared an answer for this, and I didn't. I mean, if I'm in 2002, and I am
or now,
that's
either one.
Tougher. I like. Mm-hmm. I go back to Nicole Kidman just kind of like by training, but I do think probably if like you sat me down with all of this fresh and nobody has won an Oscar yet, I would vote for Julianne Moore. Like I can imagine myself really going with like my friends in the critics groups. Like that sounds like exactly something that I would do at this point. Like that being kind of like the cool
kids.
Yeah. But like I wasn't too cool for the hours then, and I don't think I would be now. But it's hard. Like I can't vote on it just on merit. Like I get so wrapped up in like narrative and who deserves it and where are we? So it's hard to separate myself from all of that. So I think I would probably land back on Julianne in the end.
Yeah, I would have voted for Julianne Moore in 2002 and now.
Yeah.
I think she is operating on an entirely different level and balancing so many different tones, and there's so many possibilities for that performance to go wrong or feel silly or whatever it is, but she just is so in sync with Todd's vision that that's always been a performance that I treasure, honestly, probably the most from Julianne. I think it's the best performance. So it would have been nice if she had won for this, but happy for Nicole. I think she would be my solid runner-up in this. You know, if I was ranking all of them, I think that's a very perfectly deserved win.
Yeah, if you do think of Julianne as like, what is like, if you can pick one, what is the thing? It's probably this movie. And it is not The Hours for Nicole. And maybe that's the argument that the wrong person won, but what can you do?
Maybe. Yeah. Well, Katey, thank you so much. This flew right by.
Oh
this
my God,
so fun.
Of course it did.
Yeah.
2002. Yeah. What better year to flash back to?
I know.
I imagine there's so many years where it's much less fun to talk about all the nominated movies, and this was a great one.
You're telling me. Yeah. But yes, thank you so much for doing this. This was so great. Tell people where they could find more of you on the internet.
Yeah, I'm still hanging around on what used to be Twitter at Katey Rich. It's spelled KateyRach. That's also where I am on Letterboxd. And on Instagram, I'm at Katey Rich Talking. I didn't letterbox all of these movies. It was really just Frida and Unfaithful that I felt like I needed to like watch all the way through. The rest of them was like, they exist in clips in my mind. Anyway, you can read my letterbox thoughts on those and other things. And yeah, I'm at The Ankler and hosting the Prestige Junkie podcast and writing the newsletter, which you can subscribe to at theankler.com. But the podcast is wherever you find podcasts. And it's good. You should listen to it.
And Fighting in the War.
And Fighting in the I always razz David Ehrlich for that. Yes, I host the podcast Fighting in the War Room, which has been going on for like 13 years for no money whatsoever, done for the love of the game, hosted with me, Dave Gonzalez, Matt Patches, and David Ehrlich. And it's a fun one, too, that you should also subscribe to.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for listening. You can find me on all platforms at Kevin_Jacobson. Shows at Oscar Runner-Up on Twitter, Instagram at And the Runner-Up Is. Rate, review, and subscribe if you haven't already. And if you liked what you heard and want to hear more, go to patreon.com/andtherunnerup is, where you can hear a whole bunch of bonus episodes. And in 2 weeks, we will be breaking down the Best Actress lineup of 2003, where the nominees were Keisha Castle-Hughes in Whale Rider, Diane Keaton in Something's Gotta Give, Samantha Morton in America, Charlize Theron in Monster, and Naomi Watts in 21 Grams, with the winner being Charlize Theron. So with that, thanks again, Katey.
Thank you.
And I will bid you all adieu.